It is Tuesday, February 10th, 2026, and I'm calling this Lacey City Council work session to order. We do have, looks like a proposed, well, first of all council members are present besides Councilmember Greenstein, who's not with us this evening. I also want to acknowledge that we, the City of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and the Squax Indian Tribe. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Move to approve the agenda as amended. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Looks like we're changing around some of the order to get everything in today. This is going to be kind of a longer meeting, and so last on our amended agenda is the Economic Development Work Program. We'll have to sort of see where we're at that time. We might need to move that to our next meeting. But with that, all in favor of adopting our agenda as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? That motion unanimously carries. We have adopted our amended agenda. And first up on our amended agenda is public comment. We do have one person who signed up for public comment. Courtney, if you'd like to come up over to the podium. Please state your name and tell us where you're from and let us know what your topic is today. You have 3 minutes.
I'm Courtney Holthouse. I'm actually a litigant against the City of Lacey. And here I go. My hair didn't fall out when I was a child. It wasn't stress. It wasn't idiopathic. It was taken in clumps from the roots. And I held a paintbrush in my hands. A child's brush, like I was supposed to be old enough to carry the damage, but young enough to shut up about it. Then came the baseball bat. Then came the drowning attempt for fun. At 10 years old, I ran down the street screaming because a boy chased me trying to grab my developing body. An adult saw. They watched. They cashed out and walked away. I was calm and gentle when I was a child being hunted. I tried to be polite and gentle when I was being destroyed by workplace retaliation, and no one came. I've been fighting 11 months pro se in federal court, so here's what everyone gets now. Me, with a memory like a ledger and a spine like a stacked deck. Because while everyone has been busy minimizing what happened, I've been collecting receipts. Every contradiction, every missing record, every convenient, we don't have that. Funny how the truth keeps disappearing when it gets too close to the people who wear authority like armor. But I've learned the tells. The way people smile right before they deny you. The way they call you unstable when they can't control you. The way people say we're worried about you when they mean we're worried you'll make noise. It's not subtle, and I'm not stupid. Everyone thought I was bluffing. They assumed I'd cry quietly, take the loss, and leave the table. But I didn't. I stayed. I shuffled my pain into proof. I turned survival into strategy. And here's the part everyone missed. I'm not fighting because I enjoy conflict. I'm fighting because I saw what happens when people do nothing. I lived what happens when kids get hurt and adults call it not that bad. I saw what happens when a system rubber stamps danger and pretends it's policy. That's what I saw when I was an accountant for the Washington State Department of Corrections. I blew the whistle. I'm sick of watching people talk about protecting children and vulnerable people like it's a cute slogan they can wear and remove depending on the weather. I'm fighting because silence is how predators keep access. I'm fighting because denial is how institutions keep power. I went through bankruptcy alone at 29 in the same federal courthouse because I was alone and ran out of money. But I didn't stop filing my federal motions. I've screamed alone in my car after hearings covered in my own urine from the stress. But I'm still fighting because the people I want to protect deserve a woman who won't fold. Thank you.
Thank you. We also received one written public comment. Is there anyone else wishing to address this council this evening? Seeing none, then let's go into our next agenda item, which is our Black History Month proclamation. Start with.
City of Lacey Official Proclamation. Whereas, during Black History Month, we celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by Black and African Americans to our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development, and
Whereas in 1915, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a noted African American historian, scholar, educator, and publisher, founded the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and initiated Negro History Week in 1926, selecting the month of February to coincide with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. Then in 1976, Black History Month was formally adopted to honor and affirm the importance of Blacks in American history and beyond, advance the cause of civil rights, and strengthen families, communities, and the nation. And
Whereas the first enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas in 1619, marking the beginning of legalized slavery, which continued with the founding of the United States of America and was legal in the country until the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865. And
Whereas, since the abolishment of slavery, many iterations of racist laws and policies were instituted across the country that served to disenfranchise Blacks and African Americans from full political, economic, educational, and social opportunities, and
Whereas despite these abhorrent attempts to enslave and exclude Black people, as a result of their determination, hard work, and perseverance, Black people have made invaluable and lasting contributions to our community, the state, the nation, and the world, achieving exceptional success in all aspects of society, including business, education, politics, science, medicine, the military, sports, and the arts. And whereas the Association for the Study of African American Life and History's 2026 theme, A Century of Black History Commemorations, celebrating the 100th anniversary of recognizing Black history and its impacts on society. And
Whereas this Lacey City Council is committed to creating a community where everyone feels safe and welcome. And the observance of Black History Month calls our city's attention to the continued need to dismantle racism and build a society that lives up to its democratic ideals. Now, therefore, I, Andy Ryder, Mayor of the City of Lacey, on behalf of the Lacey City Council, do hereby proclaim February 2026 as Black History Month in the City of Lacey. And I urge all community members to recognize the continued need to dismantle racism and to build a society that's more just, peaceful, and prosperous for all. Signed by myself, Mayor Andy Ryder, on this day. And Cliff, you want to come up and scoop.
There's another one.
Few words. Normally, we would have done this at our first council meeting, but we had two council retreats back-to-back on Fridays, and so we didn't have our first council meeting, but we felt it was so important that we get this proclamation out to our community that we've decided to do it on a work session, which we normally don't do, but we're happy to do in this circumstance. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
To Mayor Ryder, council members, and residents of the City of Lacey. On behalf of the Pearl Foundation Puget Sound, I'm greatly and deeply honored to accept the Black History Month proclamation from the City of Lacey City Council. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in U.S. history. This recognition not only celebrates the rich tapestry of Black heritage, but also acknowledges the tireless efforts of organizations like ours in uplifting and empowering our communities. The 2026 theme, A Century of Black History Commemorations, marking 100 years of National Black History and celebration, focused on how these commemorations have shaped an identity, fostered pride, advanced equality, highlighting the importance of persevering Black history within a national narrative. At the Pearl Foundation, we are committed to fostering positive change across the Puget Sound region. Throughout our various initiatives, we strive to promote education, advocacy, culture enrichment among individuals of African descent and beyond. From providing scholarships and mentorship programs, supporting local businesses, and organizing community events, our work is centered on creating pathways for growth, resiliency, and unity. This proclamation serves as a testament to the collective dedication of our volunteers, partners, and supporters who continue to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion in every aspect of our endeavors. As we commemorate Black History Month, let us recommit ourselves to honoring the past, celebrating the present, shaping the future where every voice is heard and every dream is within reach. Thank you to the City of Lacey City Council for this esteemed recognition, and we look forward to further collaborations in building more equitable and a vibrant Puget Sound community for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So now we're at the time where we always look forward to meeting with our planning commission to go over the work docket and the work program for the upcoming year. This council, recognizes all the hard work you guys put in for the city of Lacey. It's hard work. It's not glamorous, but it is very essential to having the community that we all cherish here, and a lot of it has to do with your work. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for everything you do for our community. But with that, can we actually kind of go down and do some introductions, and we'll start off at the end, and we'll go around for everyone.
I'm Tanya Moore.
Robert Lane. Spencer Zeman.
Jeff Gadman, Chair.
Carrie Ann McMichael.
That's good. I think that's good. We just always want to know. We have we've had some new planning commission members. So again, thank you for all your hard work, and let's just go right into it.
All right. Well, then I will take it away here. Good evening, community. Vanessa Dolby, Director of Community Economic Development. So before we start talking about the future, I just want to take one last opportunity to pause and reflect on the work of the Planning Commission from the last 2 years. Our last work program was a 2-year-long work program that was primarily focused on the comprehensive plan. And our Planning Commission, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, did put in a significant amount of effort, and just taking one last moment to recognize that work over the last 2 years that they put in with them here this evening. So starting with that, and then looking back, now we have the opportunity to look forwards, and this is my first opportunity here at the City of Lacey to bring a work program before you that's a joint program with Planning Commission to look at our community planning efforts, our docket program, as well as our long-range planning efforts. So what you have before you is a little bit different than maybe something you've seen in the past. We're taking a little bit of a different approach to this work program, but it is informed by a number of things. Primarily, it's informed by it's informed by implementing our comprehensive plan, as well as state mandates and identified code needs that comes out of our staff and when they're actually reviewing projects on the ground. And then lastly, public requests. So there's kind of 4 main informants to this. We worked with the Planning Commission to come up with identified priorities. But the other piece in this is that this is a running list. Not everything on this list can be moved forwards in 2026. And that was the intent, is to be able to document the work that we need to do and then focus on how we prioritize what we can do with our existing resources. So we spent a lot of time internally with our staff to really hone in on what can we accomplish with the resources that we have? And we identify that in the attachment here, identifying hours assigned to each one of these particular work program or docket items as well. So with that, I will hand it off to Jeff, and we had something I wanted to say as well, so there you go.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for hosting us tonight. Having sat on your side of the table, I know this is a meeting I always look forward to. As Chair of Planning Commission, I definitely look forward to it. because I think it's important for us to get face-to-face and to meet with you, one group to another group, because then we get to know what each other is thinking. And we did spend, as Vanessa said, the last couple of years doing the comp plan, which is a very heavy lift. However, that is more overview. You know, it's setting the vision for the city's future for the next 10 to 20 years. Thank you for accepting the work that we did. Now we get to the nitty-gritty of planning, and it's a little bit more of a microcosm of things. And so in ways, there's more work for the Planning Commission involved, and so I appreciate my fellow commission members for their commitment. And we do have one member that's missing tonight, Judy Doyle, and then we've got two members who are not here, two brand-new members that are not here tonight, and thank you for appointing them. And with that, I look forward to this meeting every year, and look forward to working with you guys and throwing you some things that hopefully you can live with.
All right, great. Well, good evening, City Council, Planning Commission. My name's Ryan Andrews, and I am the lead staff to the Planning Commission. Set out tonight to give you an overview of our 2026 docket and work program. The idea for tonight is to present you with mostly the items that are in the work plan, some ideas for some things that could change in terms of some priorities, and then turn it over to you for discussion. This will come in front of the council in its final format as a consent agenda item for your adoption here at a future future regular meeting. So as far as the docket and work program goes, so as Vanessa said, this balances state mandates and community priorities. Much of this comes from not only our comprehensive plan, but other sources in terms of, you know, community feedback that we've received through the comprehensive plan and other processes. It's interesting to note that we're shifting from state mandates as far as comprehensive planning goes now to state mandates as far as implementation. So you'll see in here a lot of code updates and those kinds of things that are actually required by the state of Washington, and that actually takes up a good portion of my staff's time in responding to. And that brings me to the second bullet, which is this work plan does consider the limited city resources. Essentially, this work plan that's in front of you is to be done with the help of 3 employees on my staff and some help from our economic development and current planning staff as well. The process will establish a formal roadmap. That's what the work plan does. It basically sets out what we'll be doing for the next year, and in some cases 2 years of our work. And as mentioned, this was developed hand in glove with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission held 2 work sessions, one in December and one last month, to go through this information before presenting it to you tonight. So as Vanessa mentioned, this looks a little different than previous work plans, which we've just kind of brought those work programs to you. You haven't necessarily seen what is on the full list of docket items. And so this is basically kind of 2 different things. We're asking you to formally adopt the work program, but we also want you to be aware of what's on the list that maybe didn't make the cut. And that docket includes the work program items as well as those things that didn't make the cut. So keep that in mind as you go through this. Most of this is going to be presentation on the work program, but there are things that could be brought up for discussion that maybe land on the docket that we didn't have the resources to be able to prioritize. And if you're interested in bringing those things forward, this would be a good venue to be able to do that tonight. So our work program is a blending, like I said, a lot of state mandated code amendments. Those are code amendments that are required by state law. A lot of these were done in the last several legislative sessions, and we are expecting more as a result of this legislative session as well. Chances are those would hit in future work programs. Optional code amendments, as I mentioned, these are not necessarily mandated, but they are necessary to implement the comprehensive plan. They've been identified as part of maybe some community feedback and some of those things that we've heard along the way. We've got another section on comprehensive plan amendments and rezones, and I'll get into a little bit more detail on what those entail here in a little bit. And then finally, our last category, which is our division work program, and those are things that don't easily fit into the other three categories. And most of what makes up our Community Planning Division work program is actually our climate program, is a lot of the work within that. So we'll kind of go through each one here. So first, starting with the state mandated code amendments, the lion's share of the code amendments are really related to housing. So the state legislature has really been very hyper-focused on local government's response to the affordable housing crisis, and so has really kind of layered it on to us to have to respond to those things. Many of these things we are actually past due on because we are working at the same time on our comprehensive plan. We did not have the resources to be able to complete these amendments. So for several of them, we are actually in an interim period right now where we're operating under what's allowed under state law, but we do need to address these in some local code amendments. And the first of which is co-living housing, which will be brought to you tonight in another briefing. Second is amendments around accessory dwelling units. So this would address things like size limitations, the number of accessory dwelling units allowed on a lot, and those kinds of things. Lacey historically has had very permissive regulations around accessory dwelling units. Those permissive regulations need to be even more permissive now under state law, so we will respond to those, and those things will be coming to you shortly. Middle housing, which would allow for things like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes on single-family lots. We already allow many of these options on single-family lots in Lacey. We allow duplexes and triplexes already, so we do need to make some amendments to allow some other housing types in this space right now. Permanent supportive housing, this would allow, so state law required cities a number of years back to allow permanent supportive housing, which would include also transitional and emergency housing where hotels are allowed, where hotels are permitted. So we've been doing this by interpretation for a number of years. That's the reason Maple Court was allowed to go forward, was it was a permitted use in that zone, but we do need to recognize that in our code. There was also some homeless encampment protections on religious property that were enacted by the state that we need to respond to. And finally, some conversion, building and zoning code language related to conversions of existing commercial buildings into housing. So the state is wanting us to be more allowable towards that here in the near future. Chair Gavin.
Yeah, just to comment on this. So legislature really started focusing on housing, lack thereof, and homelessness back in the mid-2010s. And they enacted a lot of tools that jurisdictions were able to adopt to help accommodate more housing, better response to homelessness. And in about 2021, legislature grew very, very frustrated with the slowness at which jurisdictions were adopting those tools. So starting in 2022, what you started to see was the legislature enacting laws where it was thou shalt. Not thou may, now it's thou shalt, and that is what is sparking a lot of this work.
As we were looking back at the last slide, it was saying co-living housing. Is that similar to, say, SROs or single-room occupancy?
Correct.
Okay. And then on the last point there, the conversions of existing buildings to housing, would those types of conversions of commercial buildings into housing, would that be easier to do to co-living housing or SROs than to regular apartments or other things? Because I know that there's lots of different retrofitting and things that have to happen there.
We need to look into that last bullet in a little bit more detail. We're not quite there yet, but it does allow for some common spaces and those kinds of things to not have to meet certain codes. So you're not required to do a full upgrade of the building as you might under current building code, is my understanding of that.
I'll add a little bit there. So this particular item, if you look at the work program, actually is intended to implement 3 different separate legislative bills. Those bills vary in terms of what's included in each and every one of them. In addition to what Ryan said, there's some unique provisions in there, such as we have to allow like an 8-inch extension on the top of a roof to allow for solar panels. We have to allow an additional setback reduction for extra insulation. So there's some climate stuff built in there to allow for those conversions to be easier, and so on and so forth. It's very nuanced and detailed depending on which bill you're looking at. And so it will end up being a package of all of these items to address within our code to be able to respond to those 3 separate bills from the state legislature.
Thank you.
So still not done with the state mandated code amendments. These are the ones, though, that are not housing related. First one being childcare centers, which would be allowing basically a daycare center as a permitted use in all zones. So right now, daycare centers generally are allowed in commercial areas, so this would allow for daycare centers in residential zones as well. And then the state also is getting, kind of like they've gotten into the business of housing very deeply, they're also getting in the business of parking and saying how much parking communities can or can't have. And so, keep in mind that these are all things that are required. We don't have a lot of discretion on. And so I just kind of wanted to bring these things to your attention as we move forward, because the next slide will be on things that we actually have a little bit of discretion on. So that would include things like our street merchant regulations. So this would be led by our economic development team. Our current street merchant regulations are considerably out of date, like much of our zoning code, especially our commercial codes tend to be. And so we really need to update our street merchant regulations to be in line with current food truck operations and those kinds of things. It's really an outdated code that was more kind of based on kind of like a merchant stand than it was a food truck. And so I think we need to kind of modernize our code from that perspective. The second bullet there is related to mobile and manufactured home protections. I know this is something that the council's heard a lot about from residents of the mobile and manufactured home communities in Lacey, wanting to look at zoning and other protections to make sure that it's, that their homes aren't, the land under their homes isn't sold out from underneath them and converted to other uses and those kinds of things. This is especially true from the Mountain Green Mobile Home Park, South Lacey off Yelm Highway has come to the council, I believe, on several occasions to discuss this. So this is in the work plan for this year to address. Another thing we heard loud and clear, we heard this very much from the Planning Commission, and I know that the council has received a number of inquiries and public comments on looking at updating our tree regulations. This is a multifaceted look at our tree regulations that would be done in conjunction with an update to our urban forest management plan, which is further down on the list. These are the bulleted items on the list here, but I would, number 2 there is one I think that the council would be want to be particularly aware of, because this would be in response to some of the public comments you've been receiving from some neighbors related to tree removal in and around trees that are not necessarily dead, diseased, or hazardous, but maybe causing damage in other ways, limbs landing on structures and those kinds of things. We did want to bring to your attention, this is, I believe, the last slide on the optional code amendments. These are a couple items that did not make the list, but we did want to make sure that the council was aware that they were considered, and if they are to be added to the work plan, we'll need to consider removing other items from the work plan to be able to accommodate these. The first is the home energy score model ordinance, and this is a model ordinance that was developed in conjunction with the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative. It's a regional home energy score being floated kind of across all of Thurston County. I believe Thurston County and the city of Tumwater are moving these amendments forward at this point. This would be a home energy score that would need to be disclosable upon sale of a piece of property and would be done as part of the real estate transaction, similar to the inspection that you would need to do at your typical kind of single-family home inspection. This would require essentially a very similar aspect, but mostly focused on a disclosure around how energy efficient or not energy efficient a home would be. So we did want to bring this to the attention of the council. This is not something at this point that is proposed for the work plan. If the council would desire to do this, then we would need to look at adjusting other items. The other is battery energy storage systems, and I don't know too terribly much about these storage systems other than they are a battery system that are contained within a building that essentially takes power off the grid in times of excess power and sends that back to the grid in times of kind of, underserve or depletion of power, and sends that back out to the grid in times of more peak demands. And these are being more common in communities across the nation, becoming more common. There's, I believe Tesla is the main battery provider at this point. I'm aware of an application in Thurston County, and we've been receiving inquiries at our counter about actually locating these in Lacey. There was a model ordinance kind of draft code done at a regional level that we potentially could use as a model for all of our jurisdictions, working cooperatively to develop that ordinance. But at this point, we just don't have the capacity to be able to move this forward. And again, if this is something that we need to rise to the level of being something to move forward in the work plan, we'll need to adjust accordingly.
Is there any capacity at the regional level to move their model ordinance forward? It seems to make more sense if we did it that way instead of each jurisdiction do their own.
Yeah, Thurston, my understanding is Thurston County has at least drafted the model ordinance. I'd have to look in to see if they've actually taken it before council for formal, or commission for formal adoption. We did work interjurisdictionally to develop that model ordinance, but what I can say is there would still need to be work done at the local level. One, to adopt the regulations within our code so that we could apply them through our permitting process. And then two, to maybe consider some more urban-style regulations that we would want to apply to them versus kind of the rural lens that was placed in that model ordinance. That would be for Planning Commission and Council to consider if we advance this through the work program. We could come up with what some of those amendments to that model ordinance would be.
Before we leave this topic, I'd like to talk a little bit about the home energy score model ordinance. I'd like to get an understanding of the impact on staff, because the Climate Collaborative has made this their main work. And if Lacey's not taking part, that's going to have an effect on the whole organization. So, but I need to understand the impact on staff here and the planning commissioners and how you all came to that.
Yeah, and I'll say that, we in the work plan have put in, if it is to be considered, first of all, we need to ask council the question as far as do we move this forward or not? And if we do, we've got about 40 hours of staff time that we could dedicate towards that question if it's asked. We would still need to adjust our work plan to be able to accommodate that. And then as a part of that process, we would then need to scope out what the needs of our staff would be in terms of outreach of the program. I know right now there's, a considerable amount of time that's being an effort, energy, and interest from everybody involved, either the real estate community or the environmental community, to try to, balance this issue. And so that requires a significant amount of staff time to be able to do that. So we would need to kind of scope that out. If the council was to say, yes, this is something we want to do, then at that point we would need to further amend the work plan to put that in. There's also consideration on the back end as well, as far as like, how do we make sure that we have people in the community that can do this work, right?
That was my question. Is there enough people out there who could do this work if it was a requirement? Could you imagine, like, you're trying to sell your home, but then you can't get anyone to do the work because it's there 3 months, that'd be a big issue.
So right now, we don't require it across Thurston County, so the workforce essentially doesn't exist. The people exist. I mean, the people that are doing home inspections, they could get certified to do this work. So it's certainly possible that those people could be trained up and, be able to do this within a fairly short amount of time. But we're not doing this work right now specifically, and from what I understand, the closest jurisdiction that does it is down in Portland. So it's not like, Pierce County or, somewhere else that we could just take employees from. There's also, so talk about the workforce implications, but there's also enforcement applications to this as well. So, if people aren't doing this, then there needs to be enforcement as a part of that. And, we have one code enforcement officer for the entire city right now that if we were to, add this to the list, we'd have to figure out how other things are prioritized.
And then I'll just add, in addition to everything that Ryan said, is that the 40 hours on our work program would really provide the opportunity for maybe Lindsay to come back and talk about the past efforts and what might be included in a future plan. And then all of the efforts and all these questions that come up in terms of operationally, if we adopt this ordinance operationally, how do we implement this? What are the staffing needs? What are the dollars, if any, that are going to go along with that? Would be a full work program item for our climate position that would probably be in excess of 200 hours. So to that end, what we have before you is a suggestion to keep it on the list, and that's one of the reasons we want to have this running list, is because everything on here is important. We just need to figure out what's important tomorrow, and then what we can do next year, and then allow some of these other jurisdictions to move forwards, watch and learn, and then maybe reconsider in 2027.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're almost there. Rezones and comprehensive plan amendments. This is just a one slide highlighting this segment of the work plan. The big item here is a revamping of the zoning code for along Martin Way. So the mixed-use high-density corridor code, which was last updated, I believe, in about 1994. This needs to be revamped basically kind of for two reasons. It's out of date. There's also been a significant amount of work done in the Martin Way corridor study that recommended some zoning code updates that we need to do. But also, and I'll get to this in another slide, it also would be in conjunction with a future annexation of that area so that we could be in lockstep with the correct zoning regulations if and when that property was annexed. And so that's why we're also anticipating that it's going to be a 2-year project, which would also sync up with essentially the 2 years that it would take us to be able to annex that area. We've also programmed into the amount of hours up to 3 private comprehensive plan map amendments and rezone requests for 2026. As part of the 2025 comprehensive plan update, we actually went out to the community and asked them to give us their community requests for rezones. We were able to take on I believe about 13 of those through our update process. There were a number that didn't make the list because of various reasons in terms of our staff capacity and other reasons. And so we're expecting that several of these requests will come in as a result of the ones that we weren't able to get to last year. And so we're budgeting in 3 private requests for this year. And then the final category here is the Community Planning Division Work Program. So as I mentioned, these are items that weren't easily kind of put into these other buckets as far as the comprehensive plan and rezones and code amendments, things like that. These are things, some of which will touch the Planning Commission, but many of them will not. So this really includes our climate program. So this is the work through the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative. An update, as I mentioned, to our urban forestry management plan, which was last updated in 2021 and will be done in conjunction with some of our tree regulation updates as well. And also this project will consider updating our urban forest canopy assessment that we did a number of years back and see where we're landing as far as how much canopy we're gaining or losing over time. This includes other climate programs like our Energize Thurston program, which was an electrification campaign, our climate resiliency education campaign, our energy audits and solar feasibility studies. This would be a grant-dependent project. I will announce that just recently, the city was granted by the state of Washington $350,000 in additional Climate Commitment Act money to be spent over essentially the next year and a half. So the good news is that we're getting a significant amount of money from the state to be able to complete these items. And then, as I mentioned, we've got another category here for coordination with Thurston County, which includes annexation. This would be annexation of around or in excess of 10,000 residents to likely include the Martin Way corridor and potentially other areas. This would be a 2-year project. This is not something that necessarily touches the Planning Commission, but again, it would be great because this would sync up with the updates to our Martin Way corridor zone. And then updates to our urban growth area, our joint plan with Thurston County, which is being scoped out right now. As an update, I will also announce that Thurston County is right now going through a process to essentially adopt by reference Lacey Municipal Code when it comes to things like zoning and other things. And so it's really, that's exciting news from my standpoint, because for so long we've been kind of out of sync. The city adopts regulations and it takes several years, maybe a decade or more, to get adopted at Thurston, those same regulations to get adopted at the county. And so after this is done, which should be early this year, those regulation updates that we make will be basically done in lockstep. So as soon as we adopt, they will adopt ours by reference. It will be done at exactly the same time as we adopt. So that'd be great.
You know
Right.
how good that is.
So as I mentioned, we're happy to answer any questions or take any additional feedback you have tonight on the work program. We will bring this back to City Council at a future meeting to be adopted by council via consent agenda. And then just one last thing, which is just a reminder, which is any subsequent additions or removals from the work plan will require council approval. So if there are things that happen along the way, whether they need to be added or taken off, we would need to come back to council and have that go through a formal adoption process. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So obviously what the biggest changes that we're seeing, and as Chair Gadman just pointed out, the biggest difference is the state mandates that are coming down. The thou shalt is somewhat new, these unfunded, mandates. I know it's not, what is like sort of the normal process for a zoning update like that to take? Because it feels like we should have a better response to the state legislature when they do a thou shalt, and they should be able to give us a time for implementation, because there's so much that goes into that implementation of thou shalt. It's not just like, okay, it's going to happen. There's a process that every city goes through to do that. And so I feel like we should have a better response where whenever a new mandate comes down, the implementation time should be, automatically built in. And I don't know what that should be, but, you'd have a better idea on some of these thou shouts.
So, as far as like updates to the zoning code, those typically take, I'll say, anywhere from 6 to 9 months, start to finish. Some are easier than others. Some require more public outreach than others, and that's typically where we run into additional time that's needed. I think the state has given jurisdictions time to be able to respond to these mandates, but we're so busy responding to other mandates that we can't respond to these mandates.
Yeah.
So all of that to say, there's a lot of mandates, but it's interesting. We're in a time where, in my career, in our career, it's really been, community planning has really been, driven by the community. Like, we operate under this framework, under the Growth Management Act, which sets some boundaries, but really it's the community that kind of figures out how to implement that. We are getting now to a situation where the state is taking it upon themselves to telling the community how they're going to implement things. And so from our perspective, some of these items won't take too terribly long to bring forward to you, because we are essentially going to be, shortening our public outreach and those kinds of things, because those are things that the state is saying we have to do. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to go ask the community what they think on this when it's going to be required anyways. And so that will speed things up from that standpoint. So like I mentioned at the beginning of that statement, is like, that's usually where things tend to take longer, is the more outreach we have to do, the longer those processes take, because these are essentially mandates. They're telling us what we need to do. We're, unfortunately, the community's not going to have much of a say in this, and so, we're taking those timelines down on that, on that side of things.
If I could just add one more, it's one thing about the process to implement these standards, but I think those who've been around on council for a while have heard me say this quite a bit. The three key principles of planning is patience, patience, patience. Mm-hmm. And what we find is we have 1 year where the legislature wants to fix, and it's the preeminent issue in the state, housing affordability, access to housing, different types of housing models, and it's a very important issue. So they'll create these tools to try to solve that issue 1 year and make these mandates. And as Ryan said, before you can implement those, they're adopting more because they're not seeing the last year's work come into fruition. And so they're not having that patience to, one, to adopt the codes, but then it takes time, as I think at the local level we understand.
To implement.
It can take several years before you see some gradual change of the implementation of those standards and policy you create. And so there's constantly like, we're making progress, but we've got to pass new regulations. And so how do we get some message to the legislature that says, look, create a comprehensive package and then start working towards it. When we went back to the early days of the first implementation of the Growth Management Act, the first thing was you need a plan for 20 years. And it was amazing once you got to the 20-year mark, how much of that population growth projections, how much of that land use development was fairly accurate during that planning time, but it gave opportunity for that to take hold. So it's just the challenge we have right now is trying to address something that's a very important problem for the local communities and the state, but how do we address it so we have time to implement these type of actions?
Yeah. And the other thing is the staff time and everything it's taken. We should at least be somewhat keeping track of that to see what the financial impact is on doing some of this implementation. So if, and it's all good ideas, I understand that, but, they're forgetting about the cost to do this. It just doesn't magically happen. There's staff time behind it, and all of our budgets are tight, and, there's things that we would like to get to, we can't get to because we're having to do this instead. So I think it's a full picture that we need to hopefully start building so, we can take that information and talk to our legislators about the realities of some of this going on. So I know it's all good intention.
About 6 months ago, me and Vanessa went to a city's meeting with the lieutenant governor. And two big things that came out of that meeting was pretty much every city, said a lot of these mandates don't make sense because every city's resources and needs are way different. But then the other one that was part of it that's really popular was the office space to, residential conversions. And they had talked about kind of doing like a continuing work group with that, but I don't know if Vanessa ever got any updates, or that's something that we can check in on, because they were basically saying like, a lot of stuff that we're making people do is not working. So like, let's fund some special projects and then actually see what works. So I don't know if that's something that we can, while they're here, that we can maybe check in on.
So I can respond to the specific feedback as a result of the roundtable that we went to with Lieutenant Governor. There was a report that was produced as a result of those efforts. There was more than just that one conversation. There was multiple conversations made at the state level. That was, I believe, published at the end of December, which has informed a number of bills that has been at the legislature over the course of this past year, and we've been actively engaged in those bill conversations. The most recent one did just pass cutoff, so it's still moving forwards. I'm happy to share the bill numbers with you offline so that you can take a look at them if you're interested, as well as the report. The one other thing I'll just add, and while I wish I could share better news, but this work program has on the list for the state mandates just those mandates that our staff is obligated to complete either yesterday, by June, or the end of 2026. There is a whole separate document that is not included here, which is next year's round that we'll be elevating to priority that came out of the state legislature. The reason we don't have it on the list is, one, it's just a lot, and two, there's a possibility that this session of the legislation could change those. So we're just going to wait and see, and then we'll develop the list next year.
Good.
I think it's also important for us to recognize that a lot of these are unfunded mandates that basically allow something to happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to solve those things. And so we've been trying in the Planning Commission to just ask the questions of the N, right? So like, how many ADUs do we have in the city limits? Do you know? The answer is 20, right? And so like, when we're talking about being able to allow to, which is great, it is a lot of staff time, and the N might be very small. So we've just been trying to ask those questions as we go along, because most of this is unfunded mandates, which is great in theory, but we need the actual private community to invest in once we allow these things. We can allow 6 different types of middle housing, but if the builders only know that one model sells and is profitable, we're going to continue to see those challenges arise.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, I do want to give the legislators some grace here. I mean, what they're reacting to is 15 years of being completely pounded by people saying housing affordability is an issue, housing availability is an issue, and the very visible homeless problem we have in Western Washington. But to Robert's point, the other thing that we're battling with these mandates, it's great, we put them in place, but the neighborhoods that were built from the 60s until present have had covenants, restrictive covenants, that these things don't touch.
Yeah.
But the legislature also passed a law that said new, and I don't remember the effective date, but new subdivisions cannot have those covenants that restrict these things. So it's going to take time for all of this to take place, to Nick's point. We've got to let things kind of percolate a little bit and see where things play out so that we can react. I mean, we all want this, right? We all want to make housing affordable. We all want to make sure that the homeless have a place that's safe and dry and secure to stay. But it's not easy. 10 years ago, when I was working on it, we thought it was easy.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say, talk about one of the optional code amendments, which is the residential lot tree requirements. This is something that we've gone back and forth with quite a bit, but it seems to me if you're in one of these older neighborhoods that has one of these trees that's healthy but is constantly dropping limbs, and it's, a somewhat safety issue, that should be addressed. We shouldn't push that off into a future year to address an issue where every windstorm, the person inside the house is very nervous. I've been there before. I've been in a house that had very, very old trees that would drop limbs, and it is absolutely frightening. And we have so many days out the year, during the winter that happened. We should be able to address that by a simple amendment to say if you can prove that there's limbs dropping on your home, that, you can do something about that tree. We shouldn't have to push that off.
Yeah, and it's added to the work plan for that reason. I think that the staff generally agrees with that. Just as a reminder, I know there were some people on council that, back when this was changed in 2022, I came to council and said, hey, let's look at some ways to be able to be a little bit more flexible with some of our tree removals. And at that point, council said, okay, we hear what you're saying. We went through a community process, the planning commission reviewed it, and actually made the regulations more restrictive at that point. So, I just wanted to remind the council that, especially those that maybe weren't here at the time, that, we did provide some options at that point, and that's not the direction that the council wanted to go.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I was part of that council, and I think there was the big distinction is if it's a healthy tree, that's not a dangerous tree. That's somehow I felt like that has got lost in that translation a little bit.
Well, I think it's a little bit of the definition of a dangerous and hazardous tree, traditional definition, and now you're looking at if it's producing, blow down limbs and those type of things. And that's a different, because in all intents and purposes, that large Douglas fir, for instance, even though it's dropping limbs, it's still a healthy tree in its natural process. So I think the definition is maybe a little bit different way to look at it, but, Ryan's correct, is at that time, the council decided to be a little bit more restrictive on tree removals versus the more flexible options that were presented at that time, but that doesn't mean we can't go back and revisit. Nothing's written in stone.
Yeah, and I'll just point out, we did identify this as a high priority, and this was something that was a high priority for the planning commission as well. So if the council would endorse our plan to move forwards with this as a high priority, we'll make sure it's on the work plan for 2026, so we can work on it right away.
Specifically that issue, I think that's a high priority. Yep. Not feeling safe in your house should be a high priority.
Yeah, we have it listed as docket 11, item B.
Okay.
Where do we fall if we tell someone they can't take a tree down and then that tree falls and, kills somebody? Like, do we have liability in those instances?
Typically, as in any type of assessment, we have a qualified forester go out and assess the tree, and there's protections in doing that work and in conformance with your regulations, standards, and professional expertise. So the liability is minimal. Doesn't mean you remove all liability or cannot be subject to any type of lawsuit, but those protections are built into the work of the city as long as you're acting within your framework of your ordinances and your regulations and processes.
Just have one quick comment. For mobile manufactured home park protections, we've been approached by this multiple times. We have talked with a lot of the residents. At what level are we expected to protect these things, these parks, and for what period of time? It's going to be kind of awkward telling developers and builders and landowners, hey, maybe you had plans for that, but you don't have those plans for the next 30 years. Because of, what the state is passing down to us. So I'm trying to figure out like what level we're supposed to get to for these protections.
Yeah, I'll address that. Feel free to add anything too as well, Ryan. This item we've identified as a priority, but we've put a lot of hours on it because what you're bringing up is there's a lot of options to be considered in how we approach this. And those are the types of things that we will explore as we start to open up this work program. I also imagine that this is another one of those items where Ryan talked about engagement with the community. We'll have a robust engagement program with this to get feedback from those that maybe live there, as well as the rest of the community, the development community, and we plan on implementing that into this particular docket item so that we can have a real robust conversation about what those options are and maybe the impacts of those options, good, bad, or like otherwise.
Well, like the city of Tumwater has put a ton of energy in this item in particular. It'd be nice to not reinvent the wheel and see, what they've done and how's it going. Is it working? It'd be nice to have a more of a regional approach on this as well. So it seems to me maybe that's one of those things like let's not reinvent the wheel here. Let's maybe reach out to Tumwater and see where they're at.
Yeah.
Anything else? I mean, there's a ton of things I would love for us to jump into, but there's not enough time, to do all this. And so, I think it would, just with all the state stuff coming down, state codes, it's just, it's sort of limiting us to think on a more broader, sort of framework for our city, because I do think there are some rezones, and also allowable uses, even within some existing zones, that should probably be looked at. A lot of those, as we went through that on our, community commercial work, we realized, boy, that hasn't been updated in a long time. Times have changed. And so it's probably that way in a lot of our other zones as well that may need it just as bad or worse. But obviously, we're not going to be able to get to that when we're constantly trying to keep up with state mandated code amendments. So that's the other side of the coin where we might not, that's the other issue with some of these mandated code amendments. It doesn't let us get to some of the other things that we're trying to do. So is there anything coming from the planning commission level that you think we're missing, that we should take a look at?
No, I think, part of the dealing with the state mandates is, Ryan and his team and Vanessa are very, very good at estimating the time. Mm-hmm. But until you dig into the nitty gritty, you don't really know, right? I mean, you can estimate, okay, well, here we've got 80 hours of staff time. Well, nope, it's 160.
Yeah.
And so, if we can get these things done faster than what we're estimating, then we can certainly dig down deeper into the list and start doing some more of the want tos. Okay. And that would be our goal. Yeah.
So at this point, I think you're right. I think let's just see what it takes to get through this, and then we can always, if we're getting a little bit, if we get through some of these faster and we have some other opportunities, let's come back and meet and we'll talk about next steps, and instead of waiting all the way till next year, but you'll know that better than we will.
I just had one other thing. So on the conversions of existing buildings to housing, as a city, we've, provided some tax benefit and breaks for developers to, turn a certain amount into, a certain AMI and so on, so that we can get people interested in getting invested and stuff like that. And it's been working over here, with MJR. And is the state offering or providing any tools that would also assist in kind of giving a little bit of a relief to developers, or that might help push this along?
So the MFTE is a state-level benefit that's offered that we've adopted locally, right, as you mentioned.
So that one
in
did come from
Midtown.
that? I thought
Yeah,
that was us.
that came from the state. Beyond that, off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anything that's state-driven.
Not for market rate.
Not, yeah.
Okay.
There's other financial tools that are authorized at the state level that we've talked about separately, but not specifically to drive market rate development at the local level.
So the way the MFTE works, and it's just kind of a pass-through because it's state-funded or it's state exemption.
State
and then-
exemption.
And then it just kind of passes through us, and that's how it's working so far.
I mean, how do you want to?
It's a tool
a-
that local jurisdictions can use to provide an incentive for residential. It's not a pass-through, it's a exemption on their ad valorem tax for the improvements on the property. So it's at the local level. It's just a tool to authorize that the local jurisdictions can use to be able to implement that.
I know, but it forces us to spread that discount amongst the rest of our assessed value. So then the state doesn't really, and so that's why I was asking, it doesn't seem like they're really offering much except for, hey, you can spread that cost
Spread
out.
that, yeah. That's probably a better description than that pass,
Yeah.
it's spreading that value out amongst all the property.
It's a lot cheaper for the state to put requirements on cities to do things than it is for the state to provide money for people to build things.
I know, it does feel like we're always in a reaction mode, and it'd be really nice for us to make some recommendations coming from the state on what we think could work, right? And so instead of always being reactive, say, hey, we think if you did this, it would have a bigger effect of providing affordable housing. I don't know what that is, but that would require something to go on the work plan to try to figure out a recommendation to them. But that seems way better than us being in a reactive mode. Just saying.
And if I can just put a plug in off of that, it's one thing for us as a city of Lacey to advocate for that, or even if we do a shared agenda for the Thurston County jurisdictions. But really, that's where the role of working with AWC to have a stronger voice about what that looks like with, at the local levels and what are those opportunities and suggestions are. But unfortunately, a lot of times, the AWC as well as us are always in
They're
that reactive
in
state
reactive mode too.
versus trying to figure out how to, promote and be proactive in that conversation. And that's the venue, is working through AWC.
So if I can add one last thing, I think we have definitely presented, thanks Planning Commission, a very robust work program for the coming year for the efforts of the Planning Commission. And if the council is okay with the items we've identified as priority, we will bring that back before you on consent agenda. But the other thing I'll say is that we'll also make an effort to ensure that we report back on our progress as well with the council.
Yeah, I have a question about ADUs. I think it's great if you're able to have more than one on your property. And if you have two ADUs on your property, that property becomes more valuable. And the more valuable that is, the more expensive it could be, which could end up pushing the most vulnerable people out. Is there any way to look at the equity map or other tools to try to make sure people don't get pushed out of their homes or their neighborhood?
And I can address the ADU question. That's another one of those state mandates that regardless of any consideration, we're going to be obligated to implement it. However, we, through our comprehensive plan process, did a joint effort to look at displacement. Actually, the manufactured home agenda item is one of the things that bubbled to the top of that as one of the highest risk displacement for two reasons, socioeconomic reasons as well as age. And so that's one of the reasons that item has bubbled to the top as an implementation item of our comprehensive plan to address displacement in our community locally.
Go ahead.
Just, I really want to thank you for your time tonight. Planning Commission really finds this meeting very valuable every year. And just as a side note, last night I was talking to former Mayor Karen Fraser, also former Senator, and telling her that this meeting happens every year, and she was really excited. She said, we never did that when I was at Lacey, and she said that's got to be a really good addition. And I want one final note. I do think being a planning commissioner is sexy, so there.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to add a little context to that about the ADUs. So specifically as part of that state law, you can break them off into a separate property deed so they can be sold off irrespective of the primary property that they're on. Yes, so all of them can be deeded out separately as well. I don't believe it's mandated, but it is possible.
Okay.
We got consensus to go on the consent.
Yeah, do we have some consensus to go on the consent agenda? Looks that way. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So in that situation with the MFTE, the state's just saying, hey, just make the rest of the people pay for it, as opposed to.
Well, yeah, well, yes and no, right? It's, what they're saying is not the increased property value between improved, right?
So we'll leave the property on the tax rolls
As improved for 10, 15,
20 years, and that's where they're saying, hey, that's our contribution.
Yeah.
We're doing a quick shift over.
Oh, great, thanks. But it does hurt the junior taxing districts like the schools, right? They don't see that. New people come in, the fire department, right?
Yeah.
They don't see it. And so, I mean,
Yeah, because now it's like, okay, it was $500,000, it's ballooned up to $1.5 million, but it stays at $500,000.
well, yeah, and then you have a bunch more people coming in. You have to serve those people, but you don't get any. I mean, it's there's no easy.
Are they throwing in anything?
All right.
Okay. Talk about trying to find more permit supportive housing and what's the right formula. We're gonna talk a little bit more about the Franz Anderson Permit Supportive Housing Project. I'll turn it over to Rick and Vanessa.
Thank you, Mayor Ryder, and not to be outdone by the Planning Commission panel, where you've got a large panel to come up and replace it. So thank you for giving us some time to do the switch over. As the council recalls, we had a previous work session on the Franz Anderson Permit Supportive Housing Project. So this is the second conversation off of this topic. Just a quick recap, the Low Income Housing Institute is the project proponent for the Franz Anderson Permit Supportive Housing Project. And they had made a request to Olympia to modify their project to allow up to 35 units to be, of the 71 total units in the project, to be able to be offered to residents or clients that are up to the 50% AMI threshold, household income threshold. The reason why we're here today with that request is that there is an existing interlocal agreement that's been put together between the City of Olympia, City of Tumwater, City of Lacey, and Thurston County to help co-fund this project. And that original agreement really specified that it be developed as a 71-unit permit supportive housing that targeting the 0 to 30% AMI. And so having that ILA in place and this being a change, it brings it back to the conversation about how do we go forward to amend that ILA, and this is the purpose for the conversation with council. And again, again, as we look at this project, as we originally went into it several years ago, it was really starting to set up that infrastructure and continuity between the the right-of-way encampment removal program, the ERP program by the state, and the state funded quite a few projects to help offset the displacement of those individuals that were in encampments along the I-5 right-of-way into facilities such as Maple Court and the current Franz Anderson Tiny Home Village, as well as some other facilities throughout the Olympia and Thurston County area. With the Franz Anderson Permanent Supportive Housing Project, it was a part of that system. And so as part of that original interlocal agreement, as I mentioned, it's to target that 0 to 30% AMI, but also to be a place for preferential placement for individuals from the current Franz Anderson Tiny Village, which is about 35 units, which would be, as this project is developed, would be solely phased out. And then also priority placement for individuals from Maple Court to also help the facilitation of Maple Court to transition to a permanent supportive housing project that's consistent with the MOU that City of Lacey entered into with the Thurston County as well as Department of Commerce. So again, I think the core of this issue is how we set up a series of facilities that can help support the be able to provide housing and shelter for those people that are currently in homeless encampments around the community, as well as those that are in the shelter, such as currently how Maple Court is set up. And of course, I think there's no question that there's a need at all income levels. I know Meg will kind of touch upon this a little bit later, but just some quick numbers. Based on some work in the past for housing needs that was kind of facilitated by the Thurston Regional Planning Council. Just in the 0 to 30% AMI, there is a need in this in the county for about 8,700 units to be produced to create to fill up that demand. But also 30 to 50% category is another 8,500 units. So there is a big need. But again, part of the genesis of this request is to provide additional units for that, to reach that 50% AMI to help, of course, with the project being approved by project vouchers, to help spread that voucher money out to have less need on the overall housing voucher system, but also to make it more marketable to potential low-income tax credit investors. So again, the question for council is for this tonight is appropriately to amend the ILA based on this request, and then if so, the provisions that should be incorporated in that amendment that will maintain and protect Lacey's interests as well as the region's interests in providing a system of housing choices and opportunities to place people. So at the previous work session, the staff, we introduced this request, and based on that following discussion with council, there are several questions that council had at that last work session that related to getting more information on the environment around housing vouchers and what that program looks like. What does the low-income tax credit investment environment also look like, and what the dynamics are there, and how this plays into factor in this decision. Also, you had some specific project questions regarding the Franz Anderson project itself. Also, the status on Maple Court and its planned conversion to permanent supportive housing. As I mentioned, we have the existing MOUs that speak to that, as well as we received some funding from the state legislature last year, the amount of about $4.25 million for that conversion. And then, of course, the best practices for case management. We start looking at mixed AMI structures, and you have permanent supportive housing. What are those practices and best practices for case management? So to address all those questions, we brought in a group of experts in their fields and components of that. I first want to say thank you very much for taking the time to prepare some presentations and be here tonight to be able to help with this conversation for the council. We have Craig Chance from the Housing Authority who will be able to speak about the housing voucher program, because the Housing Authority does manage that process in Thurston County. And I'm sorry, I didn't get you. Karen McVeigh. Karen McVeigh also is directly in line with management that program. We also have Sharon Lee from the Low Income Housing Institute, known as Lehigh, and John Torrance and Alyssa Tobit, thank you. And then down at the end, we have Meg Martin, who is with Interfaith Works, that can be able to speak to some of the best practices in case management. And of course, Sharon and her team with Lehigh can talk about both the status of Maple Court as well as the project at Franz Anderson, and also talk about some of the case management and tie everything together. So we thought we'd kind of allow them to go off with some prepared remarks or presentation, starting with Craig, then moving on to Meg, and then wrap it up with Sharon's team to talk about the project specific, and then have some Q&A with the council. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig, unless the council has any initial questions or comments.
Thank you, Rick, and Mayor, council members. Vanessa called and said, could I give you a quick summary of the low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC program, and Section 8 or Housing Choice Voucher program? And I said, oh my goodness, do they have 2 weeks? But then I thought, I'm going to have to emulate one of my nieces. She's a software engineer. And one day I said, can you explain to me in 25 words or less, in words that I can understand, what you do up there at Microsoft? And she thought for a moment and she said, I work with data storage. And I said, so you work in the Microsoft cloud? And she said, yes. And I thought, good enough. Beyond that, I'll get lost. I'm going to try to emulate my niece and see if we can make this understandable in a few minutes for you. This is just an outline of why the need for subsidy exists. And again, for all my friends and colleagues, we could nuance numbers exactly, but the point here is if you're trying to build housing for people who are our lowest income neighbors, the arithmetic doesn't work very well. Even if a person or a household could pay $700 a month, which would be the top end of that 30% AMI range, the numbers simply don't work. When you get to the bottom line there's about $8,000 left over. Perhaps you could borrow $100,000 to build a fourplex, is what this example shows, would be maybe $1 million by the time you bought the land, paid all the fees, and did all the construction. So it's not going to get you very far. So you're going to have a need of some form of subsidy. Subsidies can come in two forms, capital and operating. These are common sources of the soft money capital subsidy to buy the land, to build it. There are a couple that aren't on there, and you're all, of course, considering one of those, and that's a direct appropriation from the municipality, and the City of Olympia is engaged in that, as well as offering land at a very discounted bargain, essentially granted level. But these are very common programs. The state's Housing Trust Fund, our local Thurston County Home Fund, and the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. The Low-Income Housing Tax Credit is a federal program. It's not in the budget process. It's part of the tax code. And therefore, it's wildly complicated. It's been described as the Rube Goldberg method of raising capital, just the way it is in our tax system. But it's an important producer of low-income housing. If we could cue up a little video, it's produced by an organization in Michigan that explains this in 3 minutes. Again, it's simplified, but it's good.
This is the story of how the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, or some people call it LIHTC, changes this into affordable rental housing. Scooter is a nonprofit developer. He wants to turn the abandoned school down the street into apartments low-income families can afford. He's done his research, the financials work, his nonprofit can maintain the apartments, and there are plenty of people who work in the area that need affordable housing. Scooter meets with neighborhood residents, and they think the project to revitalize the abandoned school is great. So Scooter picks out his development team, and he's ready to go. Except he needs $750,000 to start the project. Where can he get that money? Scooter knows about the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. His project meets the program requirements, so he submits an application to the state government. In Michigan, the agency overseeing these tax credits is MSHDA, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. MSHDA has a certain amount of tax credits to give out each year, and this year, one of the projects they choose is Scooter's. MSHDA gives Scooter a non-refundable federal tax credit worth $1 million over 10 years. This sounds great, but Scooter's development company is a nonprofit. They pay nothing in federal taxes, and LIHTC is non-refundable, so even if the tax owed goes negative, Scooter's nonprofit won't get any money back. Meanwhile, over at Hometown Bank, Community Investment Officer Juanita is trying to find a way to improve the bank's CRA rating. Last year it was low, which means Hometown Bank did not invest enough in low to moderate income communities. Hometown Bank also pays a lot in taxes. Enter Scooter with his low-income housing project and tax credits. Juanita and Scooter make a deal. Hometown Bank will buy the $1 million tax credit for $750,000, and they will become a partner in the housing project for the next 15 years, sharing the risk. The bank can then use the tax credit to take $100,000 off their tax bill every year for the next 10 years, and because they're investing in a project to benefit low-income families, they will get a higher CRA rating. Scooter gets the $750,000 up front and is able to start turning the school into affordable apartments. The low-income housing tax credit is a win for both Scooter's nonprofit and Juanita's bank, and also for the construction workers Scooter will hire, the families that move into the apartments, and the neighbors who will live next to other people instead of an empty, unsafe building. Hooray! Those are the basics. You can
So
find
again,
technical
wildly
information and
simplified, there's a
application
whole
guidelines
industry
for
growing
low-income
up
housing.
around managing this. There's national CPA firms, that's all they do is this program. We're fortunate to have people like Sharon Lee who can really get into the weeds and understand how this program works and use it to benefit our community. But that's the basics. The other subsidy for operation that we're going to talk about is the Section 8 program. And I'll move forward so you can see a quick outline. If it wants to move for me. It's not moving. Is there a trick? There we go. So it's a large federal program administered locally by the Housing Authority of Thurston County. The neighbors it helps are predominantly very extremely low income. The majority are in that 30% or less AMI. And the majority of the people, 75% that we assessed, are some combination of elderly, disabled, or both. And so they just can't afford market rate housing. An important distinction in this program is unlike food stamps, SNAP, and some similar social safety net programs, it's not an entitlement program. It's funded by Congress, and this isn't anything new. It's been this way for a long time. It was created back in the Nixon administration in the 1970s. It's funded at a level that probably can afford to assist 20 to 25% of income eligible families. So it's a scarcity. It's just not an endless pot of money. The video, similar, produced by the same organization, incidentally going back to the first video, the LIHTC one in Washington, it's the Washington State Housing Finance Commission that does the allocations for us. But if you can cue up the Section 8 one, we'll learn about that in 3 minutes.
This is Renee. Renee is a veteran who is disabled in the line of duty. Her injuries aren't too severe, so she is able to work a part-time job. Over here are James and his twins. James works 40 hours a week at minimum wage. Lana had to quit her job after she started having a serious heart problem. None of these families can reasonably afford a market rate apartment, not even James. Actually, there's almost nowhere in the US where someone working full-time at minimum wage can pay for a one-bedroom apartment without spending more than 30% of their income. So right now, James is paying 60% of his income in rent, and somehow he has to use the rest to pay bills, buy food, and raise his kids. What happens to Renee, James, and Lana? Do they get evicted and lose their jobs? Try to live with friends or relatives? Stay in shelters and motels during the night? Maybe. But maybe they can get a Section 8 housing choice voucher, which will help cover the cost of rent. Let's focus on James. James learns about housing vouchers and looks to see if he makes too much money to be able to apply. His income is very low, so he's eligible. James submits an application to his local or state public housing authority, but the demand for housing assistance is always very high, and there aren't any vouchers left for James and his kids. He gets put on a waiting list. The wait is most often 2 years. So 2 years later, James gets a call that a housing voucher is available for him. James can use his voucher to live in any kind of housing as long as it meets health and safety standards, and the landlord agrees to accept the housing choice voucher each month. The voucher is worth a certain amount of money, and James has to pay the difference. Every month, James pays 30% of his income in rent, and the voucher covers the rest. After a year, James decides to move to a city where he can get a better job. He can move anywhere in the US that has a Section 8 program, and his housing voucher will go with him, as long as he works out the details with his current public housing authority before moving. In most cases, James will have to live in an area for a year before moving again. Sometimes, though, housing choice vouchers are attached to specific housing units, and these are called project-based vouchers. If James applied for and received a project-based voucher, when he moves away, he will lose it. The next eligible family on the waiting list moves into that housing and gets the voucher. Those are the basics of the Section 8 Housing Voucher Program. For all of the details and regulations, visit HUD.gov. Practitioners may also find the Public Housing Agency's toolkit useful at csh.org/PHA toolkit.
One difference locally is, it's a little grimmer than presented. She said 2 years. It's actually probably more like 4 years. And the wait list periodically opens and thousands of people will apply. And then there's literally an electronic lottery. People are placed on it, and then it'll take probably 4 years to get through the people that are on that wait list. So this is our local capacity. HUD gives us, as you can see, a little under 2,200 vouchers. It's an annual budget of around $26.5 million. So every month we're sending out payments to landlords around $2.2 million. We are limited by either the budget or the number of vouchers. I really want to emphasize that because a lot of people think it's the vouchers that limit it. The thing that limits it pretty much across the United States today is the budget. It's dollar-driven, and it's largely because rents have risen so fast, as it highlights up there. In 5 years, the amount that we subsidize for each household's gone up about 62%. Yes.
Is that state or federal budget?
That's a federal budget. It's entirely a federal program. So it's awarded through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. So how do we keep pace and get new people on there with such a problem? And it's a little bit, when there's an opportunity to apply for more vouchers or more dollars, we do it, and they do give us inflationary increases. But candidly, the main driver that opens up space for new people, be they in the project-based or the tenant-based, is attrition. Attrition happens for happy reasons. We work with people and they make more money and they no longer qualify for the program. They no longer need us. That's a good thing. And the sad reason is, keep in mind, there are a number of elderly people on the program. People do pass away, and that's one of the big drivers. Attrition's around 10, 12%, closer to 10% right now. That's what opens up the capacity. Project-based vouchers. Important distinction here is HUD sets a hard cap of 30% of our vouchers. We're at about 25% right now, so we don't have oodles of capacity. We started doing this 20-plus years ago, and a number of properties are being funded with it. We have some capacity by number of vouchers, but it's not endless. An interesting distinction, and maybe it's a point I'd like to brag about, is 0 of those vouchers are in Housing Authority of Thurston County properties. We own around 600 properties, and we've chosen not to use them in our properties. They are all contracted to various successful nonprofits who are very good at permanent supportive housing, and this way we leverage their skills. We stole a term, shall I say, borrowed a term from the Seattle Housing Authority. We call it collaborative housing, how we contract those out. There's the list of the entities that we contract with for the project-based vouchers. There are about 500 of those units in the community. So with Lehigh, an excellent partner, we have a long-time favorable relationship. And you can see it's the Fleetwood down by Sylvester Park in downtown Olympia. It's Billy Frank Jr. Place, Lotus Court, and Unity Commons that we have contracted with Lehigh. And it's a good, successful relationship. We're pleased with it. So when Franz Anderson rolled around, we knew that this was a project that enjoyed broad community support from the county, from the local cities, and something we'd want to support. One of the kind of oddities of both the Housing Trust Fund and the Low-Income Housing Tax Program is they want to see that there's some project-based voucher support. I think there's other ways to show operating support, and that's a whole different topic, whether that's entirely rational or fair to a county like Thurston that's already heavily committed, but they need that, and they get actual points for it. So in 2024, we produced a letter that said, gee, we support it. Lehigh is a wonderful partner. They'd be excellent for this project. And then explain we have a monetary problem. We're headed toward what HUD calls shortfall. And we predicted that in 2024, and we were absolutely right. Shortfall means that the agency, given the rising rents and the obligation to help support the existing participants, will likely spend more than that grant award from HUD. And HUD's okay with that. They have a shortfall fund. They say okay with it. They're okay as long as the agency, the housing authority, institutes what are called cost-saving measures. And the basic cost-saving measure, the two significant ones, you take no names off the wait list and you don't entertain any project-based vouchers. Our predictions are true. 2025, we went into shortfall. And we anticipated that in 2026, we might actually roll out of that situation. And shortfall, again, it's just a function of those rents rising so darn rapidly, and you can't really control that or people would lose their funding. And so we did what we're told. We hit the brakes, we got funding, and now we're in a situation where our internal modeling, using the same forecasting tool that HUD uses, says, no, we won't be in shortfall in 2026. The HUD folks need to concur with that to release that status. And I was pushing HUD for a meeting on the topic, and understandably, and I think rationally, they said it's hard, Craig, to have that meeting when we don't have a federal budget passed. And so you all know that that recently happened here, and so the federal budget was passed through the houses of Congress and signed by the president. And now it has to work its way through the federal process, down through HUD, and they issue us a budget. I think maybe by April we'll see a budget. And of course, it's kind of late in the year, but that's what's going to happen. When that happens, we want as quickly as possible to have that meeting with HUD. HUD has issued a letter to every housing authority in the United States that says we're going to be very cautious this year on watching the budget because there are some large housing authorities in America that they anticipate are going to have large shortfalls. So they have kind of put in bold, very cautious. But we think we're going to get there. And it's kind of a question of when. Fortunately, this is a project that's not starting construction next week. We'll let Lehigh speak to their timetable, but my understanding is 2027. And for those banks that buy those tax credits, bankers, I used to be a banker. I spent most of my adult life being a banker. They can be nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof. They're just going to have to be patient. And I think given our relationship with Lehigh, Lehigh's absolute success with this type of product, they can sell that patience. So we are very encouraging that we'll get there, but we're just not there yet to be able to legally do it.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions at this point for?
I want to make sure I understand something. So at the macro level, if HUD gets more funding, it doesn't mean that at the operational level, Thurston County or any of the housing authorities will get more vouchers, even if there's more money added to the HUD budget.
Yeah, they may not add more vouchers. What they're going to add is dollars, and as it sounds like you're familiar with, Congress was rather generous. There was a time earlier this year where the White House proposed eliminating this program and some other HUD programs, cutting the funding in about roughly 50%, sending a
going to more transitional
package
housing?
to the states, and they could figure out what they wanted to do. Both parties of the Congress were not enthusiastic with that proposal.
Okay.
And so they did indeed reauthorize, refund, reappropriate funds for the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. And they approved it with a modest increase in dollars, which is an inflationary increase so that you could be certain as a housing authority to serve your existing participants.
I see.
It doesn't create new vouchers.
I
Right,
see.
it doesn't create
Okay.
new. That's the unfortunate thing.
Thank you.
But again, it's that attrition that's opening up space. After we've had the brakes pressed down to the floor for a year, some people have left the program for the good reasons and the bad reasons, but that's what's opening up the capacity. So, the request that Lehigh had is 18 vouchers. And once we're able to get that formal budget, get that meeting with HUD, we should be released from shortfall, and supplying 18 vouchers should not be a problem.
That's great.
I have a,
We will not, no, we will, yeah, that's my guess, is that HUD won't get us a budget until April, and then it's getting them to convene a meeting with us to reach concurring opinion that the capacity is there to remove some shortfalls so that we can do a formal review of this proposal.
How many vouchers was it going to be before this change that would need to be requested?
It was 18.
It's always been 18?
It's always been 18.
It's always been 18, okay.
You know, the nice thing is serving a little broader income spectrum does not just maybe this project, but the community as a whole is a favor, because if people can afford to pay a little bit more on their portion, we don't have to use as much money for that project. And that's certainly with the way the world is leaning, as more and more voucher capacity is eaten up, is a degree of mixed income works better economically.
And that leads into a question I had. You had a slide up there, Craig, about the project-based vouchers, and you're restricted to 30% of your vouchers to being project-based, and it sounds like you're like at 25%.
Roughly.
Does that 25% include for the Franz Anderson project?
No.
So what, after the Franz Anderson project and that 18, what type of capacity do you anticipate for other potential project vouchers till you hit that 30% cap?
For numbers of units or vouchers, it's going to be slightly more than 100 perhaps.
Okay.
But again, it's a budget number too.
Yeah.
In any given year, will the dollars be there to support?
But there still would be some capacity at Franz Anderson to include any future also project-based projects potentially dependent on funding.
Go ahead, Karen.
It depends on a few things. It's not even just voucher capacity. It also, our Board of Commissioners would also have to approve it. Because there's a lot of things that go into it when you factor whether to project-based vouchers. When you project-based vouchers, you're taking away tenant choice vouchers. And ultimately, this is the Housing Choice Voucher Program.
Yeah.
It was intended for tenants to choose where they live, not to have designated housing. Project-based vouchers become designated housing. So I think at some point, you have to decide what's the best interest for the community. And so I think there's a lot of questions that go into whether or not new projects go in.
Okay, great, thank you.
Several questions on this. Are the tax credits federal or are they state?
Federal.
And so it was a push to reduce funding from 90% continuum of care down to 30%. So you talked about slashing 60% of government funding for permanent supportive housing through HUD. And that did not go through. But my question is, my worry is that those videos were like fun and happy. Maple Court's not fun and happy. Franz Anderson won't be fun and happy. The Jungle's not fun and happy. Unicon's not fun and happy. The picture you painted with the cooperation with Lehigh and how well it's going is not an accurate picture based on the representation that we have had and the problems that we have had. So it's like, we need to start off with having like an honest conversation, I think, where things are at. And my one question to you, because we're talking about money right now, is there a guarantee that the federal government will not reduce funding this year or next year or the year after that?
I think it's because the budget's been passed for this calendar year in Congress. It is certain for this year. Like anything in Congress, I think it was Mark Twain that said, when Congress is in session, no one's life or property is safe. This means uncertainty. So what's it going to be 5 years from now?
Exactly.
Your guess is as good as the next neighbor's.
Do you see there being some concern there with starting new projects when we can't even guarantee their funding in the future?
You want to say something?
Yeah,
Is that a fair-
I would.
is that a
I would
fair
say that
question?
This is common. This is not new ground for us. So we often enter into new projects without any guarantee of next year's budget. All we can go on is what has occurred in the past. And that is that we've consistently got funded, even this year when we had the scare that maybe we would be reduced by 50%. I think there was enough public opinion that this is a critical program that we see ourselves fully funded with a little bit of an increase. So do I have confidence in this program? Absolutely, I do.
Let me ask the question a different way. What would happen if they cut it 50%?
Then we would reduce the number of people that we serve. And you have a plan in place. It is in our plan how we would structure that. The most vulnerable would be retained. So you start with the highest income. The most capable are the ones that you're going to unfortunately have to sever your relationship with. So nothing is truly guaranteed, but I would say probably the safest population would be the project-based voucher population.
How long have you been doing this work?
35 years. I'm in my 36th year.
So my one question is this, on a new project works with, if there's bankers out there willing to take on the debt for the vouchers, do we have enough guarantees of that in Thurston County for this project or projects in general? Is there enough banks that are needing to fund that?
Sharon might answer it best, but there's some large institutions, JP Morgan Chase, for example, has been an investor in Sharon's project. And Congress in it's called the One Big Beautiful Bill, there was largely a tax law bill, increased the number of the allocation of credits. So that actually went up, I think it was 12.5% for the tax credit program. And to the council member's question on longevity of the program, one of the odd political aspects of the Section 8 program is there are many beneficiaries. Obviously, the mission-driven is our neighbors who have the least income, but recall who gets the money. It's landlords, and so they come from a wealthier segment, and then the banks that have mortgages in some of those properties. And one of the original supporters of the Housing Choice Voucher Program back in the 70s was the National Association of Realtors, and they still support it, and I believe it's still on their advocacy page. So it's a broad political community that supports that particular program.
And I will say, the reason I say, we should be honest, is because I highly support like the lot project that we're doing. And my family was on Section 8. So but let's be honest in that this project specifically in Maple Court and some of the others, it's a completely different realm than.
I'd say Maple Court is a different topic. I'm not engaged in it. My agency is not engaged in it, and it's set up as a whole different.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're painting an accurate picture on this type of project, because this is the type of project we're discussing today.
Yeah, well, I'll just kind of maybe clarify, and it can kind of move on to Meg, talk about some of the case management thing, but Maple Court in its current form is a different project that we went in with agreement with the Department of Commerce, State of Washington, as the county of getting it established and then having that plan to convert it to permanent supportive housing, which is a different form than what it's currently in. And then, of course, with the Franz Anderson, the permanent supportive housing project, it's always been on that permanent supportive housing framework. And so, speaking about permanent supportive housing, of course, permanent supportive housing comes with support and case management and those type of things. So I wanted to invite Meg here tonight to be able to talk about several methods and approaches to case management and providing supportive services in these environments. And then, of course, talk about some of those best practices. But real quick, before I turn over to Meg, I just want to recognize and introduce, I forgot to at the beginning, but Jacinda Stilches is here from City of Olympia, as well as Kim Condrat here as well. So they're, at the end of the day, if there's so many questions they might be able to answer, they are here as well. So that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Meg Martin. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I've been working in this field in various ways, from street outreach to shelters to housing development for the last 19 years here in Thurston County. And I am here tonight. I'm with Interfaith Works, an organization that is not directly involved with the Franz Anderson project or any of the projects that Lehigh is going to be talking about tonight, although we are very close partners at Unity Commons. And then also separately from that, Interfaith Works operates supportive housing at a building called Sandy's Flats in downtown Olympia, a 24-unit supportive housing building there. So I believe I've been asked here tonight to just talk more broadly about supportive housing and supportive services in housing, and answer any questions that you may have. So when we look at best practices and creating models for supportive housing, there's two kind of gold standard toolkits, if you will, for how those programs are built. And the first one, which is widely adopted by the Washington State Apple Health and Homes supportive housing standards, is from the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. And it's a toolkit that shows how to create a model based on 7 core principles. And this is all research-based that has covered thousands of different examples to show what effective models can be. And the main core principles are choice of housing, what we've heard a little bit tonight, separation of housing and services. So in the SAMHSA model, it's really clear that the operation of the housing, the landlord services, and the support services are very separate. And that's the model that we have at Unity Commons. It's not the only way to do it, but that's the way that the SAMHSA organization recommends. That it's decent, safe, and affordable. That housing integration is a key component, and so that means community building, neighbor relations, having events, opportunities for residents to feel like they're really a part of something and a part of the neighborhood. That there are tenant rights. The access to housing is low barrier. That means that it's easily accessed, that there aren't a ton of hoops that people have to jump through in order to get into housing. That the services are provided in a flexible and voluntary way. They're not mandated, they are optional, but they are robust, and they are there and tailored to people's specific needs. Ideally, staffing ratios on the supportive side, so this is separate from the property management side, is a 1:10 or a 1:20 staff to resident ratio. And again, these models are the best practices. This would be the gold standard. And so not every program is able to reach every single checkbox for various reasons. For funding challenges, we aren't able to meet that staffing ratio at either of the buildings that I'm talking about today. But it's an ideal that we're always trying to work towards, right? I will also add that I am a neighbor at Unity Commons. I live 1 block away, a 2-minute walk, and I have lived in the neighborhood since well before the building was there. So I know very much what it was like before Unity Commons and Lotus Court were in our neighborhood, and we had significantly more challenges, particularly with encampments in the empty property right next to my house. We had 30-foot fires, we had tons of challenges with the encampments there, and since the building has been redeveloped and that empty lot that had an abandoned building on it has been redeveloped, property values have increased in our neighborhood. So there have been a lot of positives as well as issues I know that we are all aware of, that we all work on together as partners. So the second main toolkit is by the Corporation for Supportive Housing. It's called the CSH Toolkit. And this one offers a different property management approach that can be provided by the same organization, where the property management and the case management is co-operated. But what it recommends there is that there are really separate and distinct roles, files and offices, spaces are not shared, that there really is this distinction between what the priority of the property management is and the priority of the case management, and that they're working collaboratively, but that there's protections both for the asset, the building, as well as for the clients, the tenants. And then a real key component to that is that there's written eviction prevention policies that detail how all of the partners have worked together. So when an eviction does happen, there's clear evidence of the communication between the service provider and the property manager, and that there is really clear evidence of how eviction prevention efforts happened and how it was unavoidable ultimately. So I'll kind of leave it at that. It's a very comprehensive toolkit with examples and all this stuff. So if you want me to share any more details with you, I'm happy to. The only other thing that I'll really add for now before opening it up is that Rick spoke briefly to the Thurston Regional Planning Council housing need allocation chart. And so, as he said, in the 0 to 30% and the 30 to 50% respectively, there's over 8,000 units that are needed in both of those area media income areas to meet the housing allocation needs for the 2020 to 2045 range. And so having the units be up to 50% from a larger standpoint for the county, those units are all really needed. And so I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Any questions at this point, or we'll move on to Leah? Now we talked about the broader landscape, and you can turn it over to Sharon, and they can start talking about the project specific as well as any other project details.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. First, I want to thank the City Council and also Rick for many years. You have been very supportive. We have, in addition to the buildings we've been mentioning, you've also helped us on, we own Magnolia Villa for families with children. We have a house in Lacey for homeless women. And then we also own the Fleetwood Apartments. But I think you've been a wonderful regional player, and it has made it really possible for the region as a whole to capture significant state funding and tax credits, and with the leverage of the Housing Authority. So I think instead of each individual city going it alone, I think you've worked some amazing magic, right, to get more resources than if you just did a statewide allocation. So we're very, very happy to be here today. I just want to, this is Billy Frank Jr. Place, and this again, we, just to ad lib, we had significant Housing Authority contribution here. And this one, it's interesting, this one we actually mixed homeless young adults and as well as people living with disabilities, families with children, as well as people who have been chronically homeless. And this is definitely a mixed building. So there's an income mix as well as homeless and non-homeless. So next slide. Okay, we'll just if you look at the bottom, this basically talks about Lehigh in terms of our housing that we've done. We do low-income rental housing, workforce housing, permanent supportive housing, home ownership housing, tiny house villages, as well as enhanced shelters, which is the conversion of hotels into enhanced shelters. And we have 2 urban rest stops, which are hygiene centers for homeless people. Next slide. So I just want to focus again, we talked about Billy Frank Jr. Place, which is studios, 1-bedrooms, and actually we have 2-bedroom units. And then we have Unity Commons, we just talked about, and Lotus Court. And Unity Commons and Lotus Court are side by side. And what's common among all 3 are that the City of Olympia has this wonderful, I think, innovative strategy, which is they actually purchase the property and then they convey it for low-income and homeless housing. Otherwise, we would be going around the region trying to figure out what are good sites. But in this case, the partnership with City of Olympia has been very strong in terms of they've been very intentional using their home funds and making sure that they write down the land costs. Because they write down the land costs, it makes the housing more competitive in terms of our funding applications. Next slide. So we first want to talk about Maple Court and then talk about Franz Anderson. And as you know, Maple Court, you will see it has a beautiful new roof because when it was purchased, it was pretty much of a rundown motel. And it actually started leaking, and there were other problems with the roof and siding. So we used state funds, as you know, everybody knows, we used state funds to purchase it. The state funds were the rapid capital acquisition funds, which were stipulated that most of the units had to be for homeless housing. And then the renovation funds included the encampment resolution program, and it was the encampment resolution program that is actually paying pretty much 100% of the operations. So that's the program that's taking people, this was under Jay Ensley, taking people that are living on state and public right-of-way, resolving all the encampments that are on, on-ramp, off-ramp, under bridges related to the state right-of-way system. So the other thing is that with the number of units as a former Days Inn, it has served as many as 120 individuals and their pets. So so as you know, this was a regional effort by the cities of Lacey, Tumwater, and Olympia, and the county to jointly do something that would be regional. Next slide. So I was hoping, Alyssa, if you could talk about, we have a handout here, and also you could talk a little bit about the programming.
Hi, everyone. Yes, Alyssa Colville here with Lehigh. So just a little high-level overview of the programming, and then I can get into the flyer that we handed out about some recent updates. But Maple Court is operated with 24/7 staffing, so we have 2 shelter monitors per shift. They are in charge of the safety and security of the site, so they're monitoring the front door, they're doing perimeter checks, and they're assisting participants with, any meals, hygiene requests that they might need. In addition to that, we have a senior shelter operations manager, a shelter operations manager who provide 7 days a week coverage, right? So the SSOM is there Monday through Friday, and then it's a staggered schedule where we have the SOM there Wednesday through Sunday. And that is just to make sure that we have somebody in management on site around the clock to assist with any, higher level needs there as well. And then we currently have 3 case managers and 120 participants. We are working on hiring a 4th. We had somebody and it fell through at the last minute, unfortunately. But we are close to getting fully staffed up. In addition to that, we have a supportive services manager who comes and provides support, and then we have regular visits from our director of supportive services. I myself go there, and then we also have a regional shelter program manager and a program manager that assist in operations there as well and provide some high-level oversight. We offer 1 meal per day, as well as staff that's brought in by Operation Sack Lunch, and then for breakfast and lunch, staff provides just some staples for clients, and then all rooms are fully stocked with supplies when folks move in. We prepare hygiene kits for them, and then all the rooms are private with private bathroom. There's furniture in there as well, and that every new person that comes in gets that when they come in. So,
Your question, what is your staff turnover rate?
Staff turnover rate? In any supportive services model, the turnover, it's a difficult job, right? These are frontline folks. I would say Maple Court has recently stabilized. In the beginning when we opened, I think we had a few manager turnovers, but within the last year or so, I would say the shelter monitors for sure have been there for quite some time, and our SOM has been there for quite some time. And I've been with the shelter program for 5 years, 5-6 years, something like that. So and our case managers have been there for quite some time. So just a few things on this flyer. That's a high-level overview. Case managers offer supportive services, right? They're helping folks get IDs, Social Security, helping them search for apartments. And we do have separate operations in case management. We do like to work together. sometimes one staff member can speak to a client more than another, right? And so we really, on intake, we really make it a point to, like, operations does their intake, and there's a warm handoff to supportive services so that, you know, clients are being carried throughout the whole process. So in,
Do the next slide. But I think you want to go through this.
yes, this is what I'm getting to right now. So in December, we transitioned one of our senior shelter operations managers, Sean Pullen, to Maple Court. We successfully moved in 35 participants from Plum Street Village closed, right? And we worked closely with City of Olympia and Thurston County on getting folks that are ERP eligible shifted around so that when Plum Street closed, folks were not going back outside and returning to the streets. And that we did that in a 2.5, 3 week turnover, which is very quick to move folks in. And I think that that was a demonstration of the partnership that Lehigh and Thurston County are really working on together. So we've had 2 recent monitorings as part of this new contract with Thurston County. And if you look at the back, this is just a snapshot of our scoring at the most recent monitoring and walkthrough. So if you'll see here, we scored satisfactory in all areas, with the exception of, you know, there was some notes on the supportive services case manager. So since Sean has been there, he and the clients actually launched a community trash cleanup program. So there's a photo there of that, but the clients are really actually excited about that and are wanting to do that monthly. So they've been organizing that, and that involves, they're just going around the neighborhood, the vicinity, and picking up trash, which I think is really great. I think when you know, have buy-in like that, right, from the participants who are really like, they care about Maple Court, and they care about the community that they're in, and they want to show that they want to be a part of the community. We've revitalized the community advisory group, which has local neighboring businesses. We have the police department, Thurston County there, and they're actually working on coordinating a donation drive at their upcoming February meeting. And then at the request of Thurston County, we implemented a new visitors area that opened on February 1st. We haven't had a lot of folks bringing guests there as of late, but I can continue to update folks as that progresses. I think we've really got a good level of communication with Thurston County, and we've got Asher Cabe, who comes from City of Lacey as well and does the walkthroughs with us, and got positive remarks from him as well. And also in January, he helped facilitate a meeting with Maple Court staff and fire, EMS, PD to see how we can better work together in the community. So just wanted to give some positive updates there from Maple Court, and just have this available for you, and obviously I'm here for any questions.
There's going to be continuing monthly meetings and walkthroughs, and I think there's one coming up that the county and the City of Lacey is going to participate in. So that's great. What I want to move on to is then, because we were so fortunate that you were able to get funding for the conversion to permanent supportive housing, and so the idea is that we would upgrade the rooms. Right now, it's sort of like a microwave and a TV, and it's sort of, you know, it's not a full unit, right? So this is an example of a PSH, a unit conversion at Aspen Court, where we actually put in a full-size refrigerator, not the little, you know, the little one and then the kitchen appliances, and then we also upgrade the electrical. We also do ADA upgrades. So we are right now trying to figure out with the 4 million that you got with Representative Beth Dolio, how best to deploy that. And then there's also, I think, $1 million from the Regional Housing Council that was also supposed to contribute to the transformation from shelter into permanent supportive housing. So that's the phase we're in. And then I think because of the emergency repairs, a lot of the emergency encampment resolution funds were used on the repair work. So right now, I think we need to look at an occupied rehab, and we've been doing occupied rehab. Otherwise, we would have to empty the whole building. But we're hoping to do an occupied rehab, and because of the state funds, we have to do competitive bidding, and then we just talked about the scope of work, and then we're in the process of getting the cost estimates. But what we really need to do is come to agreement with the city of Lacey how you want to, transform the building in terms of how many units will be transformed into permanent supportive housing. I think there might be some indication to make it, some of it mixed income, like adding some, 50% units. If we do that right now, it is, according to the state, if you look at the next page, according to the state, it is 100% homeless at entry because that's how the rapid capital acquisition funds came, and that's how the encampment resolution funds were allocated. So if there's a desire to, like, let's say, make, a certain percentage, like 10, 15%, workforce, affordable workforce, to get more diversity, then we would need to collectively go back to the state, probably John Dembowski, who's the managing director, and work out a solution. Because right now on the books, it's 100% homeless, and then the idea is to convert all of it to permanent supportive housing. So that is something we can, take up. We can have more discussion about and take up. But we have to, come together and make sure that the funding sources work with the population that we're trying to achieve.
Just add a little bit of note to that for council's benefit is Sharon and her team and Vanessa and I have talked about that and about the need to set up a meeting with Department of Commerce, here shortly to get everybody on the same page of what that conversion and what the original MOU with the state spoke to in terms of that conversion as well. Mm-hmm. So that's a conversation that we're going to be scheduling to have with the state to make sure that we're meeting the original intent of the MOU that set this all up at the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, the good part about this whole thing is that the county and the city have not had to pay any of the operating costs or, so far, or even the capital. Does that make sense? So if right now the encampment resolution program is paying for the shelter, quote unquote shelter, if it gets transformed into permanent supportive housing, we can still have encampment resolution. And my understanding right now in terms of the state legislature, that they are fully funding, so far they're fully funding the encampment resolution budget, which is great. So as long as the state funds continue, then this building will continue to be supported. Now, if you decide to lop off some of the units so that they're not homeless, I don't think the encampment resolution program will fund those, but then you're going to have tenants self-paying the rent, paying the 50% rent. So it affects the budget, operating budget. But what Rick is saying is true. We would like to get together with the state to see if there's some flexibility, and then get back to you to see if there's some wiggle room because of local preference.
Well, yeah, I think that's why we're all concerned about Franz Anderson, because we can see the numbers how it doesn't work financially long-term unless you have a mix. And so for us, of course, we're hearing about Maple Court all the time, and our desire, we were all going forward with that being a permanent supportive housing with the mix in place, And then, of course, the state came along with all these dollars, and that project kind of just, obviously went to where it went. But we were always told that, okay, this is just temporary, there'll be some growing pains. It will go to permanent supportive housing. And so, as time has gone on and we've realized you have to have a mix here for it to work long-term, especially with uncertain budgets, that's when we were like, oh, okay, well, if we have to change the model over here, then we should probably look at changing the model over here. And that's where we've had some hesitance on our part, because we want this to be successful wherever it goes. And particularly here, there's a lot more units here that we have to look at. And we've seen what happens if you don't sort of have the very, very expensive level of the support side of things, when it can quickly become a major issue. So for us, we'd really want to see, what will it take to get a broader, our original intention of having mixed income units there, which, as you know, also, since it's right in the middle of a commercial area and everything else, will hopefully rectify some of the concerns that we've had. And we just want to make sure we're not losing track of that and as the next steps as we go along here.
I will say that a shelter, the shelter operation where you have people staying very short-term, or the idea is that the shelter is, they're supposed to leave after a certain period of time. Mm-hmm. It adds to instability, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that once you take a shelter and convert it to permanent supportive housing, just like, Billy Frank Jr. Place and Lotus Court, you're getting long-term tenants. You're getting people who are going to stay long-term, and they're going to be much more stable. And so the population and the atmosphere of the place will be much more stable in terms of the management and in terms of, I think, accountability, right? So I think you'll see a big difference just converting from shelter to permanent supportive housing. Yeah. I think what happened maybe a year ago was that the state was like, we need shelter, we need to push shelter because we need a place to keep people,
From the right ways,
yeah,
understand.
we want more people moving in from the rain. Mm-hmm. And once you fill up a building on permanent supportive housing, there's going to be a lot less turnover. So I think the community needs to make sure there's enough shelter space, as well as enough permanent supportive housing, and as well as workforce housing. So I think there has to be, there's these various buckets you have to fill, right? And then my understanding is that Franz Anderson, we would like to take people from the Franz Anderson Tiny House Village, take people from, shelters, because Franz Anderson initially was supposed to be permanent supportive housing as well. Yeah. But we can move into, if that's okay, we'll just do quickly Franz Anderson and we can talk about it. So again, the Olympia City Council voted to sell the site to us for $1. And the idea was that it would serve singles and couples. And then the next slide. So what you can see on the yellow on the upper left is that there's a doorway, and there's case management offices, there's mailroom, reception, and then there's a community room on the left.
The green up top is the case management offices.
Yes, case management offices. And then on the upper left is a community room with a community kitchen and common area. And then you can see the studios and one-bedroom units. So we are now permit ready. I mean, we have gotten, we just have to like walk in and get the permits. So we've done all the work with the architectural team and the contractor to get this thing underway. Next slide. Go ahead, John.
So these are, oh, thank you. I think we spoke about this briefly. Thank you again for having us today, and thank you for the conversation 2 weeks ago. We're very happy to be back to continue this conversation and work with you on this. So what we're looking at here is the area median income limits for Thurston County. So when we talk about the type of people that would be living in affordable housing, at 30% AMI, that's a person earning $24,500, and that is, if you were to be working full-time, that would be $11.78 an hour. At minimum wage, that's roughly 26 hours a week. So if you have a part-time job earning minimum wage, you are what HUD calls extremely low income. And so this goes back to Craig's point earlier about, income burdened. And so you have people that have a job, that are working, they're, not homeless, and they are paying 60%, 70% of their income for rent. And so I feel like we get caught up in this idea of 30% and below just being for the homeless, but that there is a large segment of the population that is working and still only qualifying for that 30%. If you're, working full-time, you're not even hitting the 50% AMI income. So I think, 30% AMI and 50% AMIs represent a need of, the service workers, the people trying to earn a living while not being paid very much, basically. And, to go back to, this is to just reiterate, I think the question came up last time about, do we have experience doing mixed income buildings? And yes, and I think outside of the city of Seattle, mixed income buildings are very common for us. We have quite a few in Pierce County and, outside of Seattle in King County and Thurston County as well. So Billy Frank Jr. Place is 50% of the units are set aside for homeless individuals. And then with Unity Commons and Lotus Court, the numbers there are similar because it's, it's a site, we cut it in two, the architect basically did the same building twice. And so you have 64 units in each, and 45 of the 64 are set aside for homeless housing.
And then the Housing Authority, I think, has project-based Section 8 in these, so that's why it works financially.
So there was some questions about the tax credit investors. So I've spoken with, on this project, 5 separate tax credit investors, actually 6 separate tax credit investors that we've worked with over the past 4 years. And there's a number of things happening. First is that because of, at the federal level, reductions in the corporate tax rate, there is less of a need for tax credits, which has made that the underwriting for projects has become much stricter as the investors become much more selective about which projects they go for. And so the 6 investors that we've talked to have all said that the 100% homeless model without the adequate Section 8 just doesn't work. It's just not it's not working for, to be able to close on the deal to move forward with it. And so we have proposed this, this structure where it would be, half homeless and half at 50% AMI. If more Section 8 vouchers come in, we could increase the number of homeless units there. If, VASH, the VA comes in with money, we can increase the number of homeless housing there. But at this point, all of these things are very unknown, and so we would be able, this is why we are requesting it. And then, so there was a question about, do we have a firm commitment that if we get this unit change, will it go forward? And no investor is willing to give us a firm commitment for an unrealized unit matrix. We've been told it will most likely happen. But as we slow down, investors are starting to rack up, they're starting to book other projects for their tax credit portfolios. And that also is reducing our risk as, investors are less interested or doing less tax credit deals than they have in the past. While we might not have a firm commitment, we have been firmly told that no, at 100% homeless, it's not going to work.
Can I just emphasize something there real quick? And I mentioned this when we had our HC meeting. This is a prime example of the private industry telling you that housing first isn't financially sustainable. It's just not. It's not long-term. You're saying they will not finance this type of project unless we have extra government subsidies that we have to hope every year go on. And that's why I want to make something real clear. It's everything I look at is project specific. So the issues I have are specifically with this project. I love the lot project. I love figuring out what to do with Maple Court, but the questions that I have and I will have for this are very project specific. But that is one thing I want to emphasize. We have 2,000 homeless people who are mostly addicted to drugs and have mental health issues, and 35 AMA units divided by 2,000 is like 70 of these projects. And that's not with whatever homeless replaces those homeless. That's just what we have now. So keep in mind, my questions will be with that type of focus.
Yeah, and I should point out the question is, about the uncertainty of the uncertainty of the service, funding. I think that it is incredibly unlikely that Section 8 would ever go away. If a project does lose funding, our contracts with the capital funders are structured in a way that the homeless requirements go away if the operating supports disappear and there's no way to get them back. And so we would end up serving 30% and 50% AMI individuals at those buildings, and you would, you transition your staffing plans. You would, unfortunately, have to move in higher income individuals and set rents. It's the kind of worst case scenario, but there is metrics in place for dealing with that worst case scenario.
So when do you need to have a firm go ahead to go after the investors on this project? When's the date?
Well, I think what we need right now is if you are comfortable with having some mix in Franz Anderson, just because of the economics of the tax credits, then what we would also have to do is meet with the state. Right now, the state commerce has Franz Anderson as 100% homeless. So we would have to, get that amended, which I think we should ask them specifically. Now, the good thing about the tax credit portion is that when we applied for tax credit and got awarded, we put down the minimum requirement we have to meet, and the minimum we put down was 25% homeless. So we don't have to go to them and say, we have to change it to 25, right? Because even if, let's say if we're doing 100% homeless, we would still book it at 25% homeless just to, give ourselves some, latitude, right? But unfortunately, right now, Franz Anderson is at. Did you understand that?
Appreciate that.
Okay. All right. So when we get an allocation, we have to apply to the state agency to get an allocation of tax credits. Okay. And it's based on the scoring system, right? And then because of where we're located, the minimum requirement to get the points is 25% homeless. If we were building this in King County, the minimum point is 75% homeless, okay? But because they know that local areas outside of Seattle, King County, don't have the service dollars or operating dollars, they allow for a reduction in terms of the requirement for homeless. So what I'm trying to say, it's a good thing that the Finance Commission, we don't have to go to the Finance Commission that allocates tax credits to have them change the formula, okay? Because we're already, if we do 25% homeless, we made it. But the state funds that were awarded to us right now are saying it needs to be 100% homeless.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why I think with Rick, we would go back to the Commerce and say, because the issues around, the federal commitment around Section 8 and project-based Section 8, we want to have more of a mix, okay?
Yeah.
And not guarantee that we're going to deliver 100% homeless.
So can we do that at the same time where we're asking about Maple Court?
Definitely.
Yes, that's the idea, is that
Okay.
we would do both.
Okay.
Yeah, we would do both, and
And part of this conversation too is basically because we're all in partnership in the region with the IOLA, that we'd have all of our partners also go with that supported messaging as well as a regional approach.
yeah.
And that's what the commitment, we want to go through this process. We want to make sure that commitment's there. That includes not only Franciscan, but Maple Court in that mix.
Because the state knows, Commerce knows that the tax credit investors are
Yeah.
not going to give tax credits for a building that's 100% homeless. Now, it's a little different because of Maple Court, because Maple Court is not using tax credits.
Sure.
So there's not that issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and then
Do you want to go back?
yeah, that's fine. What I wanted to say is that in order for us to maximize the number of units at Franz Anderson for homeless individuals, we would try and get some VASH vouchers for homeless vets. And we're hoping maybe we can get 10 to 12 vouchers for homeless veterans. And that's been very successful at Lotus Court and Unity Commons.
Yeah.
And then we would
Because there's a lot of
also,
money out there for that, right? The homeless vets vouchers, those are funded. It's a different type of funding.
Yeah.
It's through the VA.
They're also funded by HUD.
Yeah.
And it's a combination program where VA provides some services.
Yep.
But the money's from HUD
Yeah.
and administered by the Housing Authority.
We have a current application in for 25 new vouchers currently.
Yeah.
Don't know.
and
when.
we're asking for a part of that.
So,
Got it.
and it's
That's
a
a s-
highly supported application.
Yes, yeah.
So we stand a good
I
chance.
agree. Yeah, it's a smart funding decision.
And then if the Housing Authority can then in 2026, 2027, what Craig just explained, address the shortfall issue and then begin doing project-based vouchers again, then we can maybe get the 18 back, the 18 vouchers back. So then we sort of layer on the operating subsidies. And then we also committed to the state, part of their mix was Apple Health and Home. So the Apple Health and Home beds come with operating support,
Yeah.
and they also come with service support through Medicaid, right? So it's like we're piecing, because we can't get half the units funded through vouchers, we're piecing together other long-term,
sources, yeah.
multi-year funding strategies to get to the 50%. Yeah, so we think this would work.
And this is a model we've used on other buildings too, this kind of cobbling together of different Section 8 VASH AHA units. So here would be the staffing plan for the building. We'd have an area property manager overseeing it. That would be, they're regionally based. There would be a property manager who'd be on site, janitor, maintenance, live-in. We found that we used to have property managers be the live-in, but we found out that when people need something at 3 in the morning, it's not, they need to check on their rent check, it's because something got broken. And so we've switched that to a maintenance person. We'll have a maintenance tech that'll be at 50% time. There'll be 1.5 case managers, which at the 35 units, that would be a 23-to-1 ratio, and that's pretty similar to what we like to see in PSH. So if we increase the number of homeless units via more operating supports, we would bring in more case management. And there are 3 case manager offices that have been built in this building in case that expands to have those case managers, so they have space, to Meg's point about the individual offices and not sharing the CSH best practices.
So next slide. So, go ahead.
Oh, so there was questions about performance metrics and what type of data we're collecting. So we're collecting, demographic information, percentage homeless at entry, percentage that have obtained income. That's typically case managers working with people to get ID, to get Social Security, to collect any benefits that they may have, or if they get some type of part-time job. Percentage that have stabilized in the project, which in this case would be living there for more than 1 year. We also collect data on emergency services that are being sent to the building, ambulance, fire, police occasionally, and then the percentage that are accessing case management services. As you all may be aware, the low-income housing tax credit program, which funds roughly 50% of the capital on this project, makes it so that case management cannot be a requirement of residency. So while we work with all the individuals, it cannot be a requirement, unfortunately. And so I think, though, we do have quite a high rate of people accessing case management.
That can be a requirement on the Franz Anderson?
It cannot.
They have to qualify. They must qualify for services, but you can't say you won't get your housing unless you participate in services. So.
Can I ask a clarifying
Who
question?
did you share this data with?
Can I ask a clarifying question on that, just in terms of terminology? Because there's case management, which is checking in and seeing if they need support, but then there's services, like if mental health services, those type of things, it can't be required, but that case management, is that
Can't be. it
even
can't be
at that level,
mandatory.
just saying, hey, how are you doing today? Do you need anything?
There's rumblings that may change. I've heard that may change, but as it stands now, you can't withhold somebody's housing rights because they refuse to participate. They just have to be eligible for the services, and you have to make them available.
There is, the case managers are not just, sitting there. They're knocking on people's doors. They are constantly engaging the tenants to try to get them to access them.
But with that data, what do you do with it? Who do you share it with?
I think there is the HMIS, there is a homeless information management system. So our case managers enter data that will track, like for instance, income, they'll track their service needs, they'll track, their information like disability, race, on and on. So you can quickly pull up information about the demographics and about who you're serving. So, and then the information like that is reviewed between the housing staff and the case management staff. And then there's always conferencing. So like if someone is not following the rules and they're at risk of being evicted, or they're not paying the rent, they're at risk of being evicted, then the case management is involved in helping them either find a source or do a payment plan for paying the rent, or filling out housing authority paperwork, which is which has been a barrier sometimes, right? People don't want to fill out their recertification of their income.
So, and I just want to make very clear, on that point and this is why this model is frustrating for me, is there is zero long-term reduction in addiction or mental health from this model. And that's not in just me figuring that out. That's in the actual information that was provided by Thurston County, and every study that has ever been on is zero long-term reduction in mental health and addiction. And this is why, like, we're all like, oh, great, veterans, VASH. It terrifies me that we would put a veteran into a complex with potentially 20 people who are addicted to fentanyl. That terrifies me because I'm a disabled veteran. I have PTSD. I know what they go through. And so it's like, oh yeah, that sounds great, but this is such a deeper conversation, and that's where my frustration comes from. It's like,
Sounds like a bigger structural issue than.
absolutely, and this is a structural project.
Yeah.
And that's why I have so many concerns with it. We haven't even got a handle on Maple Court yet. And that's the data that was sent to me by the county. I can provide it to all you guys.
Thank you. I want to just say that we are extremely concerned about that as well. I am a person in recovery from opioid addiction myself, and so lost many loved ones to overdose. And so I thank you very much for your concern with that. And I want to just share a little bit about a couple of thoughts. One is that it's really important to remember the cost of not providing housing when people are left outside. And so hospitalizations are $1,200 a day. Sometimes hospitalizations can be up to $4,500 a day if people are social admits at local hospitals. Incarceration locally is around $130 a night. And supportive housing, like what we're talking about, is much more affordable in the $75 to $100 per night for people. And so there is a cost to not providing housing like this that I think is really important for municipalities to understand, to your point of how many people are left outside. But in our program that is entirely voluntary, but we are seeing people every day, we are encouraging them to connect. In 2025 at Unity Commons in the supportive housing side, on the residential side, in a completely voluntary program like what we're talking about, there were 1,163 services completed with case management among this very long list of different types of services that are like connection to medical support, getting enrolled in rental assistance, legal advocacy, substance use treatment, mental health treatment, housing voucher support, food stamps, employment support, increasing incomes, crime victim services, client transportation, client connections, caregiver support, birth certificate replacement, all kinds of different things that are happening on a voluntary basis. And so just because something isn't mandated doesn't mean that there's not high levels of engagement. And in fact, what all of the decades and decades of research show is that when things are not mandated, people are much more likely to succeed and to engage in those services. So I'm happy to answer any other questions about that.
I would just say, I get that, but with every project we've done, homelessness in our area has increased 30% in the last 5 years. So what we're doing is not decreasing homelessness. My concern is with decreasing homelessness. We could free up the rooms we have in Maple Court and provide those 35 rooms for less than $30 million. My concern is spending the appropriate amount of money to get people off the streets, out of addiction, off treating mental health issues. So we could throw around these statistics, but this is why it's a difficult conversation, because we're conflating a lot of things all together in a very short time frame. But what we're tending to do, and what I see kind of like with the original video, is we're really amplifying the perceived good and minimizing the perceived bad. That's what terrifies me, is that we're all, oh, well, yeah, we got 35 people off the street. That doesn't mean you reduced homelessness to any manner at all. There's still going to be 2,000 people out there. So it's $30 million that this project's going to cost, not counting the long-term funding, a better use of resources than potential other options. That's where my concern is. That's, how many units is the lot project?
It's 36 seniors and 36 senior units and 24 non-age restricted. So 60 total.
And Lacey doesn't have to, or we're not providing long-term funding for that, we just donated the property?
That is correct.
So that cost us $500,000, and that's a deeper conversation than, like, I'm concerned with getting total amount of homelessness off the street. And if we aren't actually getting, who's actually been to an encampment?
I have. We all have been.
Are they filled with people who are just got a part-time job and down on their luck? No, they're filled with people who have serious issues. And we're funding a model, and we're promoting a model, which we aren't sure is gonna work.
I know. Understand.
So that's what I'm saying, I'm just,
I get where you're coming from, but and there are some structural things in place that we need to look at that it's above our pay grade on this right now. So we're trying to try and deal with the information that we have and try to make, you know, the best possible decisions with where we're at. And, you know, what we've said all along is when it comes to Lacey and Maple Court is, can we set up a successful long-range, you know, program that will work there just like we need here? And we just don't want to get left out of that. The overall structure is the system working or not is a larger conversation. But in the meantime, you know, we're just trying to make sure what we have can, you know, we're not back here all the time trying to find a funding source where we're in a situation where, you know, it could disappear, which is what we've been worried about with Maple Court. So anyway, where are we at on?
Well, I guess with all that, we can somewhat wrap up, and in the sense is if council supported to continue the conversation about the changing the funding mix at Franz Anderson, I can sit down with my counterparts at Olympia and the county and Tomater to start figuring out what that looks like. I have some preliminary conversations with them. I can say that they all have said that, you know, it's not just about Franz Anderson, it's about Maple Court too, and it's a regional importance. So some of the things we want to make sure is some of the current tenets of the ILA are still in place, like preference for placement of Maple Court, individual Maple Court into Franz Anderson, and then again, the continual transition of Maple Court into permanent supportive housing. I think with what we've heard tonight and what the conversation is, there's a lot of challenges. A lot of challenges that we can't quite solve with this project, but we need to have continual conversations. And then also, I think we've heard that there's a need across the spectrum. And of course, we went into this with, you know, looking at the 30% AMI permanent supportive housing structure, but, you know, with a 71-unit project that, you know, the city, Lacey, the council has committed a substantial amount of dollars to. Trying to make that project financially feasible has become more challenging, and there's some ways to get there, but it causes a unit mix. So the question is, there's still a need for that 30 to 50% AMI as well as that 30% and less. Is this something that, in order to keep that project moving forward, worthwhile to continue to work with the ILA and figure out a way that this can work for the whole region? And that includes Maple Court and some of the other interests that Lacey has.
I think I think the expectation is if we need to change the model for this to work at Franz Anderson, we should all be on the same page with changing the model and make sure it works at Maple Court. I think that's the only thing that that's been my only concern is, like, we just don't, okay, let's fix the model over here, but sort of ignore it over on this side. It just doesn't seem right.
And I did have a conversation with Jay Burney, and he said that in public meetings, that it's not just Franz Anderson, it's Franz Anderson and Maple Court.
Okay,
and so we'll continue to work on that. But I want to also see if there's any of the council members that had any questions or feedback for me.
No, I think it's worth continuing the conversation. What would terrify me, thinking of what terrifies people, what would terrify me is if we went back to the decades of treatment first. I've done my own research about housing first and treatment first and the evidence base for housing first. And sometimes when we're talking about what doesn't work, I think we forget about evidence-based. And so I would love for us to have a deeper conversation about that. As far as the 30%, 50% mix, I'm concerned that we had some mission drift there. I know that there are financial concerns, and we have to consider having people in there at 50% AMI. But based on what I'm hearing, if we get additional funds, then we can go back or get closer to having a building where we have 30% AMI residents, because these are the most vulnerable people who need our help the most. And so that's where I am.
And I would just ask us all to remember that we can't just look at Maple Court. We can't just look at Franz Anderson. It's part of a whole system. And you start messing with one, and it's going to affect the others. So I think we need to be mindful of these regional efforts and partnerships before we make any hasty decisions.
Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate what you had to say, Meg, and all of you. One of the things that is our primary concern is having to go back to state and ask for some more money in 3 years or 4 years or whatever the case may be, because we haven't instituted some type of, financially sustainable model to continue the operations of Maple Court, and so as a city, we just feel like it would make us whole if we did that. But I also want to thank you guys for instituting some of the programs, being willing to sit down with the city and the county and listen to our side of the story. We know you guys have long experience in doing what you're doing, but it's different for every community. And so I appreciate the outreach to the neighboring businesses. I appreciate the cleanup program. That was something that I was going to suggest. I'm glad you guys did it before I got a chance to suggest it. It almost felt like you read my mind, because Carolyn and I have talked about that. And I feel like it is important to get the pride and buy-in of the people that are living there, to take pride in their area that they're living in and keeping it clean. And it kind of puts a responsibility on their shoulders. And I really wanted that for the residents of this building, so that it's just not a place that they fall in at and fall out of. So we appreciate you guys instituting the programs, listening to the county, listening to the city, and our main objective is to, make, kind of a financially sustainable situation and not have to go back to the state every 2 or 3 years to, say, can you please, give us another $4 million to continue this project. So we appreciate you guys listening. Obviously, you guys came here prepared tonight based on our conversation from 2 weeks ago, and it's really nice to feel heard. So thank you guys for engaging us with that.
I think we have our next steps here, and so I think I think the big question is still is on that financing piece, is like, when will you need to know it's a go or not for that financing to work? I'd like to kind of hear when that is, just to have a deadline in mind, because sometimes you don't put a deadline in these things and it'll never happen. But I really, the other thing I appreciate is it's like lessons learned. There's always, when all the dollars came in, right away dollars, just like, man, they just threw a bunch of money at us, and we're like, what are you going to do? Not such, no, we're not going to take all these dollars that you're throwing at us. However, it wasn't. We should probably put a little time out on that and said, okay, how many units this is going to be? What are the requirements? Because there's been a lot of heartache, and I said at the time is, if Maple Court isn't successful, it sets up such a negative interaction that it's hard to do any project going forward. It's every project. You've seen it on your side. Now people are just pointing towards Maple Court and saying, look at all the problems over there. Why we don't want anything to happen. And that can't be the situation either. And so that's why it's been so important that we can point to a project and see success out of it. But let's set ourselves up for success and not set ourselves up for failure. And that's all we want. That's all we're hoping for. In all these projects is to set them up for success long-term.
Thank you, council, and thank you all very much for all your work to get prepared for the night and being here tonight, and thank you, Cinda and Kim, for also being here, and really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Especially on such short notice.
And can I just say too, I really appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions. We all want the same thing. I may come at it from a different angle, but it's important for me to have these conversations. And I know they're ones that aren't had very, very often. And so I do want to really thank you for taking the time to answer my concerns, so.
Thanks. Okay, thanks.
Talk to Vanessa, might be able to do the co-living, need to get that done, it should be fairly quick.
Yeah.
Might be due economic in 15.
Let's just do, we'll move out the economic for next time, right?
We can if the council would like to do
Yeah,
that.
it's
Unless we
going
can
on
probably do something
9
15,
o'clock.
but you guys want to probably dig into it.
Yeah. So I know we got to get through our next agenda item, which is our co-living housing regulation briefing, because we're behind schedule. We need to get on that. So let's at least, hey. No, sorry. So we're going to go on to the co-living housing regulation briefing, and then our economic development work program. That's going to take a little bit longer conversation, so we'll put that off till our next meeting. But let's I know we're sort of behind on this co-living housing, so let's talk about that. We'll
Sure. Yep, so I'll just tee this up really quickly and then turn it over to Jennifer Adams, our housing coordinator, who's been taking this through the process. So we talked a lot earlier tonight about mandates. So this is the first one of many that will be in front of you within the next 6 months or a year. This one is a recommendation from the Planning Commission on amendments to the Lacey Municipal Code related to co-living housing. Jennifer will explain what that is and what the regulations that have been recommended from the Planning Commission are. The purpose of the briefing is to introduce the topic tonight and let you ask any questions, but we will be in front of the council for this in a final ordinance form and a future regular meeting, most likely in March. So with that, turn it over to Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for the setup. Good evening, everyone, Mr. Mayor, Council. Haven't been here for a little while, so it's nice to see everybody. And then also welcome to our new council members. Exciting to have you here. So again, Jennifer Adams, Housing Coordinator for the city. I'm going to try really hard this evening to aim for brevity and give you some of your life back. So let's go. Let's see what we can learn about co-housing. So as we heard Jeff Gadman from Planning Commission this evening speak to a number of these housing initiatives, it's true, and it's real, and it's here. So we are, staff is working diligently to try to work through some of these things. So tonight, as Ryan was saying, this is kind of the first of several to come, and maybe the easiest lift, so we'll see. Taking a look at a few of the higher level state requirements. So why am I here? So again, here because this is for sure a state mandate. In 2023, the legislature adopted House Bill 1998. Again, this was part of that broad effort to expand housing choices. Now, this is a statewide initiative. So the bill is now codified, and jurisdictions who plan fully under the Growth Management Act, which includes the City of Lacey, are required to meet these new regulations. One thing to note on this is that the deadline for co-living regulations to be adopted was December 31st of 2025. So this is one of those items that, again, staff is working to bring forward.
Is there any, if we haven't done it by that, which we haven't done it, is there, what's the?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. There's no punitive consequences for not having met that deadline. But we just want to give it our best effort to get there. I do want to comment, though, that in the interim period, should a co-living development proposal come through to our permit counter, staff understands that currently we would be preempted by the RCWs on this particular item. So looking there again at a couple other of the state-level requirements, are that co-living housing must be sited anywhere that multifamily housing is already permitted. And then we did cover the preemption on that. So let's just go ahead and move on forward. So we're going to take a slight step back and do a little level setting here about what are we talking about with co-living housing. I hadn't planned on this, but I think I'm going to just read an excerpt from the House bill. I just feel like this might give us a little bit of context when we're talking about kind of the definition and how the state has perceived this and what we have a starting point to work with. So straight from the House bill, residential development with sleeping units that are independently rented and provide living and sleeping space, in which residents share kitchen facilities with residents of other units in the building. And then the next item, co-living housing is a type of housing that can provide rental homes affordable to people with moderate to low incomes. This is really important, without requiring any public funding. And rents in newly constructed market rate co-living housing in the Puget Sound region can be affordable to people with incomes perceived at as low as 50% of the area median income. Okay, so this is kind of the starting point the state has given us to work with.
So my first question is do any of our regulations prohibit this right now?
No, they don't. No. If somebody
Yeah,
came.
I didn't think so.
If somebody came forward with this right now, we would allow it just as a regular,
yeah.
like, apartment
Yeah.
type unit.
Yeah, that's like, wait a minute, I don't think we prohibit this.
Yeah, there are some certain provisions, and Jennifer will get into this as far as like how co-living is treated as far as the calculation of density and how we can assess some of the fees, like sewer connections and those kinds of things.
On a new project, but.
On new projects,
But like,
yeah.
I could rent a bedroom out of my house and it'd be
Correct.
completely legal.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's where we find that this is fairly nuanced, right? With a lot of things we've seen in the past. State legislature, sorry, I'm having difficulty this evening with that word. It's late, and I spilled my water on the floor.
But these co-living arrangements, they're supposed to be for people who have moderate or low incomes?
So these are findings of the state, right? So.
But I was reading an article, and the problem was that a lot of the builders are making them into micro luxury units.
Yeah, and.
Concern about co-living.
So if I can address that, and I think Jennifer did mention this, the legislature does not put any income restrictive affordable requirements on these.
Okay.
Frankly, it actually looks at it in a different way.
I see.
So it's just a different type of market rate unit,
Okay.
and that's it. Which naturally might be rented at a different rate, or it might not, as you point out accurately.
Okay. got it.
Okay. All right. So if you're like me, sometimes it does help to have maybe just an example to look at. So this photo here was shared with staff, and this is a real-life today example of a project in Seattle, specifically in the University District. So we can make an assumption here that this one may have catered to the student population. There again, does not have to be the case with this type of housing. But one of the things that you can see interesting, because where the nuances come in is, how is this different from a three-bedroom apartment or a two-bedroom apartment,
It's
or
shared kitchen.
et cetera, right? So just,
Yeah, it's a dormitory.
yeah, and this project does, I believe, cater, there again to the student population. But if you see, I guess that's not a pointer. If you see, there are two sinks. Typically, you see some bedrooms and then maybe a shared bathroom. This unit offers one bedroom with its own private bathroom, but then you see two sinks that are accessible really to everybody. And so that might be a distinction with a type of co-living project, something like that.
They still charge you $1,000 a room there.
More than that.
More than that. Around the schools, more than that.
I got direct experience.
All right. So moving on, let's just take a quick look here at some of those statutory requirements. So again, we talked about how these need to be cited wherever multifamily units are allowed, but more specifically, that sort of threshold is wherever 6 or more multifamily units are allowed. And then when we talk about density calculations for these co-living units, each unit would count as 1/4 of a dwelling unit. So then when we think about, well, I guess I haven't gotten there quite yet, we'll get there. Another thing here to think about is sewer connections. There are some limitations set forth in the bill about fees for that. And that will be an item that you won't see reflected here, but that our Public Works Department would work through with their standard update processes that will be coming soon. And then this bottom bullet point, is fairly important as well, that a city may not require any development or design review standards that are more restrictive than those for any other multifamily. So it's really going to be that underlying zone that guides a lot of the development and design standards with these units. And then just a couple more here. You can't require other uses within a co-living development specifically. And then when we get to the parking, this was another one of those ratios so that each unit would represent 0.25 of a parking space. Therefore, it would take four units to equal 1 on-site parking space for these co-living units. Also, they would be just as eligible for any type of affordable housing incentive programs that any other multifamily projects in the underlying zone would be, privy to as well.
So
Wow.
on the unit count, so
Going the wrong
each
way.
sleeping unit is 1/4 of a room, 1/4 of a bedroom, or a half a bedroom? I'm sorry,
Yes, so we'll go back to that one. So each sleeping unit would count as 1/4 of a dwelling unit.
Dwelling unit.
Of a dwelling unit.
So the way to think about this is a lot of our standard residential districts have a maximum residential density. Let's just say that's 20 units per acre. That means that based on that, you could have 80 units of co-living housing. So whatever the maximum density is multiplied by 4.
Interesting. And we can require multifamily housing to have other uses on it, but we can't with this?
That's correct. Within the same building is the distinction.
Okay, within the same building.
Correct.
Got it.
Okay, I may have lost, I think this is where we were. So as we look at the draft code, which was provided, I believe, as an attachment to the staff report, 3 items there would represent the amendments that we would need to make. So one is the proposed sort of new chapter for the co-living housing code itself. The other would be addressing the parking, which we would most likely locate within our parking chapter of the LMC. And then the other one that you see in the attachment would be definitions that were necessary to create to support to support co-living housing.
Is there a certain amount of bathrooms that are required per sleeping unit?
No, in the bill there is not. But what I did want to talk about is they would have to, well, first of all, let me back up for a moment. They would have to follow building code. So that would kind of be, that triggering factor, I guess, depending on, what the proposal looked like. And then through collaboration with staff, so staff has been collaborating very regularly on all of the housing initiatives. And so a few things here represent where we have landed. This also includes different conversations with our planning commission that were very thoughtful. So we wanted to approach this with as much flexibility as possible, which, most of it was a mandate. So finding a few policy areas was really nice to see. So regarding setting a maximum for the size of each unit. We have landed on 250 square feet. Now, the building code that this would have to follow would mandate a minimum of 70 square feet, so we did feel like that offers some flexibility for developers in terms of size. And then shared facilities would be necessary, as we've already established here, with bathrooms being, let me set this up a little bit differently. Staff, in conversations with Planning Commission, we came around to thinking about some extra privacy. And so what you'll see reflected in our code proposal is that each room could potentially have a private sink and have a private toilet, not probably the showering or bathing facilities. So those shared bathrooms would still be a requirement.
It almost sounds like a garage could be converted.
Into co-living?
Yeah, there's really no limitations on where you can do co-living, other than the zoning has to allow up to 6 units per acre. So like you couldn't do this within a single-family home, for example, unless the density was greater than 6 units per acre.
Good clarification on that. And then with kitchens, the code, proposed code does reflect that every 6 units would require a kitchen. We also have some language in there about how to deal with fractions of, so you'll see that as well. Let's see, I think those were essentially kind of the highlights. Again, had some thoughtful discussions with Planning Commission. I did also want to mention that during the public hearing, there were no comments received. And then there was a unanimous vote on the Planning Commission to go ahead and move this forward to council for consideration of future adoption. If and when we get to that place, staff does feel fairly confident that we could come back by early March so that we could reach compliance with the state as quickly as we can. And that's all I have for you.
Any questions? I mean, it's being mandated, so go forth.
If the council is open to it, we would love to bring this back as ordinance format. As I think Jennifer mentioned at the beginning, I did step out of the room. We're currently operating in a space where the state regulations have taken over our local regulations.
Yep.
So the sooner we get this adopted, the easier we'll be able to implement our locally influenced ordinance, which I would appreciate.
Yeah.
So the council direction, we can schedule it for the March 3rd meeting for action on an ordinance.
That's fine, we can be done by March
Awesome.
3rd, that's great.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I don't, you could probably put it on the consent agenda too, I mean.
It is an ordinance. I just
Yeah,
wanted
it has to be an
Oh,
ordinance.
okay.
Sorry, we would love.
Dang
it.
it.
I tried.
I'm with the mayor. No.
It sounds and feels like, a very much housing is more urgent than we have all talked about, or the state is really sending down. Is there anything coming behind this that we should know about? And because this seems pretty intense, if you ask me. I'm not saying I don't like it, this is extra.
We have 0 inquiries for a development like this through our.
Are you talking about at the state level, what the state is proposing?
Yeah,
Or
what else is coming down?
There's
Yeah,
so
I
much.
mean, the bills, I think there's, sorry, I'll
Go
take
ahead.
the floor on this
Yes,
one.
go
Is that
ahead.
there's a bill of major concern from the city and from our staff at this point, which is to allow residential development everywhere across the city, including commercial zones. And for a city like Lacey that is primarily residential, our commercial zones are paramount importance related to, property and and sales tax, which is the biggest revenue generator we've got. And, something that we can add to in terms of our economic development base. If we're gonna take that property away and put it into residential development, then that's highly concerning.
That's a concern, it is very well known by a lot of cities, it's not just City of Lacey on that one, but I would completely agree on that.
So the Rite Aid on Yelm Highway could end up being apartments?
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's
That'd be bad.
even more paramount too, is it can affect our work in Midtown and trying to create placemaking, so we have all the different types of uses versus one type of use, which is what we've been trying to go away from the late 90s.
I could see how the the last formation over with in Midtown with the college, you know, but.
Yeah, there was years ago a proposal for that, and it didn't work out with the partnership with St. Martin's. And the only other time I remember something like this being proposed was right after the expansion of JBLM back in the early 2010s. There was an opportunity to look at this as a way for providing off-base military housing.
A lot of military, like base housing barracks went to that style.
Yeah, very similar.
I wasn't for it, mine were way worse than that, but yeah, that's, I think, probably where the idea got started.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So,
We got it?
yeah, we have this last agenda item. I would move that we move our economic development work program to our next council meeting and treat that as a work session. Can I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Does this sound fine? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. And now we've reached the end of our agenda. So without objection, I'm going to call this work session adjourned. Keep it classy, Lacey.
Thank you, council. Good work tonight.